for convening the work session of May 7th, and the roll call, please.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Roth? Here. Commissioner Mum?
Here.
Commissioner Pauly?
Here.
Mayor Neely?
Here. You've got a long list of agenda items,
Yes, we do.
and we have a position here to talk about future items. And I presume that's because we keep on piling things to discuss at study sessions. Is that right? I mean, the fact we've got such a long...
It's a regular item on your work session agenda.
No, I understand, no, but
I'm sorry.
the fact we have so many items here is, I presume, we've just jammed so many things on it.
Well,
I don't,
There's just
a
the
lot.
question,
Yeah.
the question I wanted to pose is whether periodically we might want to have 2 a month instead of 1.
That would
because
be
we-
fine with me.
So,
We could just spend the night.
Yeah.
well, but the point,
The point, yeah.
the point is I at least am a little bit less awake towards the end of a long meeting than I am towards the beginning.
I
I'm
agree.
just putting forward this as a suggestion. If this is a situation we're running into because we're piling so many
Yes.
items on, maybe we periodically might look at having a second study session in a month, so we don't have such long ones.
I agree.
You want to comment on that? I mean, it's case the staff saying 11
Staff's gonna say,
versus one night versus till maybe
Yeah.
8 on 2 nights.
You know, I think what we should do is kind of monitor it, and the next time, Mayor, that you come in and meet with the city recorder and I about when we're putting the agenda together, let's look out a couple of months and see what it looks like, because Nancy does keep a running schedule, and if it looks
Is-
like we need a second one, we can do that.
Appears that some of these items may be fairly long in discussion.
I agree.
Not all of them, but
No, I know about that. But, did we do the roll call? Yes, we did the roll call. And I was discussing future agenda items. One of them was suggesting that we have fewer items at a study session and maybe more study sessions. Okay, discussion items. First before us is Oregon
Wait,
City.
can I suggest
Yes.
a future agenda that
Sure,
I to
you
add
bet.
to the list?
Yeah, you bet.
Go for it.
there's the culprit.
I've been talking to the people in the elevator, and evidently our elevator has a call system built into it. Would you be the one for the elevator?
It has a phone,
Yeah, but there's,
a call system.
an
What do you mean by-
emergency call system. They said that there's a system that doesn't work if they had a problem in there. There's no way for them to reach somebody.
Well,
They probably
inside the elevator cab, I don't believe they have any way of, but there is a phone in the upper elevator control room.
Right, but this is if they had problems down in the bottom, or somebody stuck
in the elevator itself.
in the elevator itself. There's no way to reach anybody.
We have, I don't believe that, I think that's true. We haven't had a problem with that over the
Probably.
many years it's been operational, but
I'm just surprised that we're allowed to do that, because every place else that I've been in elevators, you got to have a call system. So,
yeah, I'll have to look into that a little further. If
Okay.
that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Okay.
thank you.
That's more of a report item, though, than
Yeah.
an agenda item.
I agree.
Yeah.
So we'll get back to you.
Anything else?
And we still are on the agenda for the parking work session with the Clackamas County. Is that correct, board?
I don't think we have that on our agenda yet. We have a meeting set up here in the near future with myself and Chair Ludlow, and I think their facilities person is going to meet with some of our staff and Main Street Oregon City representative to talk about sites down there where the county might be looking to add parking for the courthouse. So we're going to have that kind of a staff level meeting first, and then eventually, if we have to spend our $300,000, for example, that we pledged, then we would have to have a work session to do that, because we need authorization from the commission.
Yeah, because I want to see us move forward with that.
Yeah, we're having the meeting. If one of the commission members wants to join us for the meeting, that's fine too. We're going to have a meeting first with staff to try to identify viable sites. They asked for our help in identifying sites. So we're going to try to be of assistance that
I
way.
would like to attend if possible, since I'm on the Main Street
Yeah.
board. I think
Yeah.
it's relevant for me.
Okay? We will make sure to add
Thank you.
one or more. I
But no more than 2.
We can't have
But
more
no
than
more
two.
than two.
1 or 2.
But again, when Mr. Ludlow called me, I suggested to him that our staff have a chance to meet with their staff and work on what the sites were, so that when we had our electeds in the same room, we at least had explored viable options. We weren't just there throwing things up on the wall, and with the staff, we wouldn't feel like we were prepared to help you very much if we hadn't done our work on that. So that was my suggestion to them, is that we have a staff level meeting first and then a broader meeting after that. So does that sound reasonable?
Well, that wasn't exactly where I was going with it, but, I am okay with that.
Okay.
But I just want to make sure that that stays on the radar, just like we are going to have another joint work session with the Main Street Board, and I just want to make sure that stays on the agenda.
So
On the radar.
we'll do the staff level meeting first, and then I'll make sure the second follow-up meeting that both of you, and that's convenient because both of you were with us on the BTOP, even though it's a very different thing, it seemed to work pretty well. So we'll do the same thing.
Well, the other commissioners might want to be present too, so it might be more of a work session.
Take
I don't know.
volunteers. But it's really not a work session item until we have something to discuss.
Okay,
And right now, we just know we have a problem. We don't have any solutions yet.
okay.
I want to bring a few, when there's something to decide, I like to bring that to the work session.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
With that, Oregon City Municipal Stormwater Permit. Mr. Lewis.
So I'm feeling a little embarrassed here, but I'm not seeing my consultant in the room who's going to present this, so Brian Caldwell, and I'm looking at email correspondence right now, realizing it's possible we may have miscommunicated about the evening of the meeting. So for now, I'd like to postpone this, and let's see if we can, if they show up in the next few minutes, maybe we can put them back on the agenda.
Or
off.
It might be.
Moving on down the road. I love it.
Just trying to do as I'm told here, and
it
shorten
dance
up
for
the
us.
agenda for you.
I love it.
End of the Oregon Trail site update. Scott Archer. And I
Good
know she
evening,
has
Mayor and
staff,
Commissioners.
from other entities here.
Yes. So, John, yes, we appreciate your efforts tonight on moving this meeting. Although I wasn't quite prepared and I was working on some other emails. Thought I had a little while, so
Surprise.
here I go. Commissioners, the discussion tonight is to talk about the end of the Oregon Trail and really to focus on a couple of things. One is on our programming efforts, and the other is on facility issues. And so I'll be talking about all of those things because they really tie together in terms of going forward. And what I will be looking for is a sense of direction in terms of your comfort level in proceeding in the direction that we're going. So I'll kind of circle back to that, I think, at the end after we talk. And Dan Fowler and Gail Yazzolino are here from Clackamas Heritage Partners. I think you all know them, and I'm going to be giving part of this report, and then after I'm done, I'm going to call on Dan and Gail to give an update, kind of a progress report, and sort of what they're planning type of report as well to be involved in the conversation. As you know, the city and CHP entered last year into a what's called a license agreement, and that goes through excuse me, that goes through December 31st of this year. So we're a little over, or about a year into that agreement. In the time since the city and CHP have entered into this agreement, the CHP has received multiple grants for programming and site improvements, as they indicated was the desire to do so, and have been fairly successful in bringing out in some additional outside funding to the efforts at the end of the Oregon Trail. The hoops have been painted is really one of the big physical things that you see. There are some other site improvements that are going on, and just a lot of efforts in terms of gearing up. And now the next kind of big step in this is that the plans are in motion to become more publicly open than we are right now by the summer season. So that's going to be the main focal point of our discussion about the programming in terms of ensuring that the commission is comfortable with the direction that we're going there. And as I said, we'll be talking more about that, and I think Dan and Gail will be giving you more specifics in terms of a lot of that stuff. Facility issues, we've discussed this before. We talked about this at the Commission's goal-setting retreat at the beginning of the year. We've talked about it, I think, in some other contexts as well. We have, in order to continue forward on the path that we're moving on at the moment, with programming and efforts to increase our public use and our visibility there are some building issues that will need to be addressed if we're going to do so. And really, they're broken down into kind of what I would call short-term and long-term issues. The short-term facility issues are basically those that we need to get done in order to be open more publicly than we are now. Basically, some safety issues and some kind of building code types of issues. Now, as you well know, since the city took over the operations of the site kind of more full-time over the last couple of years, we've been doing a number of smaller things. We've been making some investments, just basic minimum maintenance stuff, and doing some things that need to be done. The items on the short-term list are going to be, the price tag on those is going to be probably just around between $35,000 and $40,000 is kind of our estimate based on some quotes that we've received. Now, and those need to be done before the summer season and also before our OCTA event. It really kind of ties back to that as well, and I'm also going to talk about the OCTA event a little bit here. These facility fixes can be done within our existing budget. So we're not asking for any additional funding per se on those short-term fixes. The bigger issue with the facility has to do with siding issues, siding and roofing types of things, and in just kind of, and these are ballpark numbers, so they're not exact, but we're just trying to give some rough ideas. But in order to secure the building, to shore it up for the weatherproofing and just structural issues and so forth, our estimate is that we're going to need to come up with around $300,000 to basically completely reside and to kind of shore things up, the existing 3 wagon buildings. Those are not necessarily going to need to be done this summer. In fact, the timeline is such that we're not going to be able to do those this summer. But those are, though I'm saying that's a little bit longer term, I'm meaning longer term past the immediate upcoming summer season. Within the next, really ideally by the next summer, but within a couple of years or so is what we're really going to need to be looking at. Because each year that goes by, the situation basically deteriorates and it gets a little bit worse. The facility issues, the longer term ones, are something that we've discussed with CHP and our other partners, that this is not going to be just on the city's back because it's such a high price tag, that really this is something that's going to take a partnership effort. We're going to need to look for additional funding sources. We're going to need to nurture our partnerships that we've already been working with. We're going to be, potentially seek grants, though it's harder to get grants for making repairs than doing things like programs and other such things. But we've had those discussions, and I think you're probably also going to hear a little bit from CHP in terms of some of the efforts of the commitment to work with the city on those types of things. We, frankly, unless there is a feeling that we're going to be committed to making the efforts to do that, we really want to proceed cautiously with opening, to the public, unless we're comfortable that we're going to be able to work forward. Now, I don't think we're going to resolve that issue before we would open more this summer, but we do have a game plan in place, and we would be, I guess you would say, it's a little bit of risk reward. There would be greater visibility and greater public greater public use is going to create more interest, and more interest is going to, enhance those partnerships, and those partnerships are probably going to generate some benefits. But it's kind of a progression thing. Staff is prepared to tackle these issues. We have, obviously our department has a lot of experience in dealing with older buildings and renovations, and the swimming pool, the Ermitinger House that we're working on, the Pioneer Center. We've done a lot of that. Where if we've got the resources, we certainly have a track record of being able to do facility improvements. But it's just a matter of having the resources to do that. So that's a really rough snapshot on the facility issues. We can certainly get into more detail if you wish to do that. A couple of other things that I think we want to talk about and bring into this conversation. One is that the city and CHP have been working on our efforts to have a better partnership with the Native American tribes. Our sense right now is that there's a commitment and there's interest from them to invest and to have a greater presence at the site, and we're kind of working out what that would look like, how that happens, and so forth. But that is something that I believe is an important part of this. I think it's something that the Commission has specifically cited in the past as being an important goal of yours. For this whole end of the Oregon Trail site issue, and I think we've made good progress over the last year in our conversations there. And again, we can talk more detail about that. And then, kind of lastly, is just the awareness of the OCTA event this summer. We've been talking about that for, I think, going on a couple of years. On Friday, July 26th, is kind of the ending wrap-up get-together for the OCTA convention at the end of the Oregon Trail site. And from direction from the Commission previously, we've been working on the city being a host of an event to our out-of-town visitors, as well as having a celebration with our own community and kind of bringing that all together. So on Friday, July 26th, from about 6 to 10 in the evening, we're lining up, and we're just kind of putting on the final touches on details. So we're not quite ready to announce exact specifics yet, but within the next couple of weeks, I think we're going to do that. There'll be a lot of announcements, and we're going to start sending out press and so forth. But we'll have various types of entertainment, multiple musical performers. We're going to do some food. We're looking at doing a Oregon micro beer and Oregon wine garden, and much more. So we're working on that event, and I think all this discussion ties that event ties to this as well, because our visibility there and publicity for the site and just kind of bringing everything together. So that's an important piece in this as well. So that's just kind of a quick summary of sort of setting the table for the issues. What I'd like to do now is call on Dan Fowler, and I don't know if both you and Gail are going to come up and report, but I'd like to turn it over now to Dan and Gail to give you the CHP report, and then we'll circle back for questions and discussion.
Thank you, Scott. Mr. Mayor, members of the Commission, good to see you. Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here. It seemed as though when we first started talking that OCTA was so far away.
Yes.
And now it's 6 weeks, or July is going to be here. So we want to thank you, first of all, for having trust in us to perform. And it was a pleasure yesterday to get a partnership award from TDC, and thank you, Doug, Mayor Neely, and Commissioner Pauly for being there. It was just totally a surprise to us to get a partnership award, which epitomized really the effort of Gail and many others to work together to change things. And I really believe that's what we've been able to do. But we couldn't have done it without your direction and without your approval to let us try. And that's not going unnoticed by any of us either. Sometimes when there's some hesitancy because of the past. I totally get that. I really do. And I think there's not, you don't always have an opportunity to change. And I think we've tried to do that. So some of the things that we've done, Scott enumerated, we painted the hoops, we've cleaned up inside totally. There's new Wi-Fi inside. We've really changed the interpretive center and the visitor center from an interpretive center, visitor center, to really a community space, because it was so limited the way it was designed in the beginning to show just Bound for Oregon. It was limited to just that. That's what boxed us in. And by the changes in technology that the grants allowed us to do, we've opened that usability up to much greater use, where we have simple things like you can do PowerPoint display presentations now, you can do DVD, you can do Blu-ray, you can do all kinds of things. We've got the interactive terminals there, we've got the tablets ready, we've everything we said we were going to do, we have done, and more. In all of those grants, and that's a lot of credit to that goes to Gail and her tenacity and her diligence. She's done a fabulous job. Some other pieces, exterior signage is going on. The Confederated Tribe of the Grand Ronde is working on parallel signage. They've helped us with a new entry and welcoming sign that's coming. We've cleaned up the signage of the street. You've probably seen that. So there's a real effort in working with them to have something that there's nowhere else in the Portland area, and that is a parallel history that tells not only the story of the Oregon Trail journey and why people left and why people came here, but it's going to parallel that same period of time, and it's going to tell the story of what was going on here. What was going on in the Native American community here, and how did those parallel, and then how did they interact when they came together? That's history. That's interesting.
Yes.
It's not told. It's not told good, not told bad. It's not told. And they are very excited about that. I could have Gail maybe talk about internally some of the thematic things they're working on, but it's really going to be very, very interesting. And the beauty of it is the way we've designed the technology is those stories can be updated. And when somebody has a new thematic story, it's as simple as putting that together, downloading on the tablet, putting up the display boards and the things that go along with it, and you've got a fresh and new look. That's something, again, that we did not have before. We were stale. And now it's going to be fresh. So we've really taken a look at that. The TV, we've rebuilt the front area and the glass, and we have the TV monitor coming, so we talked about 24/7. When people walk up to it, it would come on and tell people, you're here after hours. This is what's going on there. That's all going to happen. It's almost done. I mean, the TV's sitting there. It's just almost ready to be in place. So everything we talked about before is coming. The other thing that I want to mention, because I know it's always something that's in the back of all of our minds, and it sure is in the back of ours, is we've taken a real business approach to this. We know that sustainable, we want to be around, we don't want to start and stop. That is just, it's terrible, and we cannot, and we will not. Right now, we are sustainable. We can operate right now with the revenue we have, and anything that we do with added personnel will have a ticket that will pay for that. We will not ask for money for operations. No. Let me say that again. We will be sustainable. We've done a budget. We have projected out conservatively the visitor counts from last year and taken a percent of those based on a ticket price that's lower than ticket prices around here. And know that that will pay us more money than it will cost us in the people that we need to do it. So I'm confident that we can operate the technology piece that we're talking about and not ask for money. We'll derive it from a ticket sale. The other thing that Scott alluded to is we know that there's still more to do. The siding needs repaired. There's some short-term fixes. We've talked about this, quite frankly, with the Confederated Tribe, because they are very excited about being in there. All of the parks, actually, not just the Confederated Tribe, the state of Oregon, the Clackamas County, the Confederated Tribe. I mean, there's all of the partners, and they're all coming to the table. And there's some funding sources that they can all bring. Now, there's no guarantee, but I'll give you just an example of the commitment that I think is coming if we do this right. And Scott, you alluded to that risk, and then you build, and it takes that. I mean, somebody has to step forward, and you have, and we have, and that's right. I believe that that's right because this is our city. This is in our town. It is a city facility, but you shouldn't have to do it alone. We should be there with you, and others should be with us, and I believe we can do that. When the Confederated Tribe walked around this facility with us, and they have they want to do an encampment in the beginning, and then this seasonal story coming down the hallway, and we came into the main theater, and they said, "Do you still have the hologram for Dr. John McLaughlin? Is that still a piece of the show that can be brought up?" And we said, "Yes, we do." They go, "Well, we're considering doing a hologram of a Native American woman telling a story that would parallel McLaughlin's story." Now, that costs a lot of money. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars just to do that piece. I'm not saying it's done. I'm not being false in any of my words. I'm not saying it's done. I'm saying that's the level of commitment that they talked about that they wanted to have there. Now, we've also talked to them about there's maintenance needs. And you're right, it's hard to get money for maintenance. We got money to paint the hoops.
Right.
All right? I think if there's a level of commitment from the city to a certain level that's right and reasonable, because it's a city facility, challenge us and challenge others to join you in that project, and we will get it done. We'll get it done. So we look at it as something that we've started this. We really think we can be prepared for Okta, and the city's been a great partner in all of the things that you've done. And from that momentum, we believe we can do the next 1 to 5 years as a short term, and then we've already just teased the idea of what happens after that, and there's some major ideas that I think would be interesting as a community to have. So I look at it as, we've kind of stopped the bleeding, we've got a good program, we need to work together in the short term, we can stay sustainable, and then we can do a little bit of dreaming when we got that done. That's how I see it unfolding. So visitor counts are up 36% for the year. Revenue is up. Earned revenue, our earned revenue, not from grants, but our earned revenue is up 83% for the year. It's working. It's working. And it's working because you had trust in us.
Good.
Do you want to
Thank you.
I just wanted to say the sustainability is dependent on how strong the partners are. And I felt really encouraged yesterday when we accepted the award because TDC has been such a strong partner and recognized how the city and all of our partners. So to me, that was really...
TDC will be a huge partner on the marketing piece. When we have a little more of a product to market, when we have that, they have a big marketing budget. And one of a former commissioner, Daphne West, is the chair of TDC. I mean, I think we have a really good chance of doing some good things if we're worthy of it out
Right.
here.
We did have a meeting about the siting some months ago, and everyone was there except I think the state tourism. Scott West couldn't come, but they all are committed to getting and keeping EOT open. So I think that alone that'll help everybody.
Well, I just want to add before if you have any questions for Dan and Gail, as far as from staff working with CHP over even before we entered this formal agreement, because things were kind of moving along informally, but since we've entered into the agreement, they've been excellent to work with. I think it's been a good partnership because there have been a lot of things that we've needed to do, but they've done everything and more that I think that the city has asked them to do through our partnership. Not just the financial things, but just things like the communication pieces. Those have been tremendous. In our report, in the agreement, the commission specifically asked for some timely reports, and they've given us all of that information on the on time or ahead of time without even being asked. Just working on kind of logistical issues, and if there are problems, we've worked them out in terms of, you know, whatever, just citing things. So I just want to let the commission know that from the staff, it's been very good, and yeah, it's been really nothing but positive in terms of that agreement that you approved last year. So, and then finally, I just wanted to add one more thing that I didn't mention. In terms of the facility issues and talking about kind of the bigger budget item, in the city's proposed budget that the budget committee approved recently and that you'll be considering coming up here in the next few weeks, there is funding for some of these items, at least part way towards getting some of those items accomplished. I believe that we have $70,000 each of the 2 years of the 2-year fiscal cycle. So we've got a total of $140,000 now. Some of that goes for things like, you know, if something breaks, if a HVAC system goes out, we have to fix it, or you know, paying some of the utility costs and things like that. But I think we've got kind of a first step in, if we're looking for partnerships to come and help us create enough funds to do the whole big picture. The city has made kind of a first step commitment in going forward with that. So that, I think, is significant.
That would be huge. That's the kind of thing that you get to leverage. And I just want to say one small thing I didn't mention is that we are asking the Confederated Tribe of the Grand Ronde to also select someone to be on our board, to expand our board, and they're excited about that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Good job. Thank you guys very much.
I'd like to thank you. I mean, we, of course, tour the historic and tourist has suffered a great deal. McLaughlin House is only open on Fridays and Saturdays now. They cannot run volunteers there without a paid staff, so they're very limited. I see the Clackamas Historical Society is building up its programs again, which I was glad to see. And you know, and I could never get this across when briefly I was on the board, and I wanted to change the name to the Oregon end of the Regional Oregon Trail Interpretive Center, and then you know, the acronym would be erotic, and I'm sure you would go ahead and have lots of people coming into that particular facility, but I could never convince anybody to do it.
I love it.
Oh my gosh, and we're worried about
We would hope that as more people come because of the interest and contents, not to say that we're more important, I don't mean that at all, but the Oregon Trail is a draw. But that more people then go out, and there's we didn't even mention the major signing changes that we're going to be installing that actually help people to get to the rest of Oregon City. It's critical. We don't want them to just come there. We want them to go to the McLaughlin House, go to other places.
Well, that's why I sent everyone the email to come see, because seeing's believing it, and then I can tell you some of the programs that we're going to be doing. But one of the things is we have put a projector in the third wagon closest to Washington, and that is, we can show DVDs of all our partners, and also PowerPoint promotions. So it's kind of Oregon City then and now. So you move through anyway.
Yeah,
Come
we
see
haven't
us.
given a lot of detail, but the flow is going to change.
Yeah.
You're going to start by the business center, you're going to move through, so it's a more natural
nice.
flow. You don't have to walk around the rain. And
Yeah.
a lot of thought's been done, and we've worked a lot with the partners on that. And the flow is going to be so much better, and the content, and it works. And so when you exit, you're going to exit Oregon City. And our thought was, if you exit Oregon City, maybe you coordinate, and there's now another tour guide that actually gets you on the trolley and takes you to the
Dr.
other points of the
McLaughlin,
city.
that's what I
So
want.
On the
it's just-
what?
On the what?
yeah. Well, I know. I said it, but you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, you get the ideas.
The other thing with the ticket too, we're not going to have the scheduled tour that they have to, you know, they miss it.
Yeah.
If so you
Be a
can
lot
come
more flexible.
anytime and see as much as you want
That's
or
nice.
whatever.
Yeah.
Move at your own pace.
And we have lots more
We got some comments here.
volunteers.
Kathy Roth?
Okay.
Mine's just a small budget question. Is the siding on that thing LP siding by any chance?
No.
Wish.
No.
Good question.
We thought of that one too. We looked
Around
into
that time, huh?
Okay.
Carol Pauling?
Yes, I attended the tourism workshop before the awards luncheon to kind of get a broader, base and more education on the whole tourism. And it was interesting because they did talk about how the packaging and marketing products, it goes 2 to 3 years out before, and so you need to make sure to have those same hours, of course, 2 to 3 years after. So consistency. So I like that you're talking about that. That's really important. And to not start and stop. So to keep it consistent, and then also to be sustainable. And I really like the idea too about being able to keep up to date the programming and change that. I'm wondering if you're thinking about if when development or when things happen at the falls, if that could be part of it too.
Absolutely.
Yes, I'm open to all of it.
And
kind of an education piece,
there's
just
an education
one-stop
piece.
shopping and let
There's a
people
huge
know.
tie-in we can have there, and I hate to keep referring to, but we've talked about so much of this with the Confederate Tribe already, and because they're excited about that, and they want a presence here. They want this parallel history story told now. They see it as a precursor to that happening too. So, and I think that could help us have a better presence even and more support for that.
Because that's a big part of the story.
It's huge. So those, you're right on point. Right on.
We have to
Gathering
thank TDC too for supporting operations of the visitor center, because that's allowed us through all this time to have consistent hours, and we're
Yes.
open, all winter. We're open all year, which is rare for a visitor center. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Rocky Smith.
All right. The discussion that we've all talked about many times and brought up many times, and Scott did as well tonight, is the massive needs that the building has, that we all know it has, and the interest in wanting to get the building back open, and the hope that we can do that incrementally so that it doesn't go backwards again. And I think that's the biggest fear that we have. And there's always there's been, it seems even as of now, what staff is saying and what CHP is saying is not quite exactly together, in the sense that the city isn't 100% ready to open this building. CHP is. And so we've got to be very careful about that, and I think that definitely these partners are being built, and I think it's very clear that we have the potential to probably meet the goals that we have in getting to repairing that building and all of that. But at the same time, I don't think we want to go out this summer saying this building's opening. I think, I have no problem with the building opening a little bit, but I think we are going to be it's going to be a big risk to imply that this is the start of opening it fully. Because I don't know that we can say that just yet. So I'm still really cautious about that, because we've said that even in the grants that we've gotten in the last couple of years, the implication was that this was the reopening. We're not quite there yet, I don't think. And because what I'm saying is, in that ticket price that you're talking about, I'm assuming that, well, I need to know more details about how that all pencils out. For instance, the commitments that we hope to get from the other partners in building on the interpretive center, what part of those are back to really fixing the crucial need, which is the building itself. What percentage of the tickets go right back into the building, not just the operations of the building. And if the city has budgeted, we're saying $140,000 for the next 2 years, then what do we see from CHP in those 2 years? Do you think from both the partnerships and and the ticket revenue, et cetera. I mean, you may not have a specific answer to that now, but how
I can give you a specific answer.
Okay, how are we filling that hole so that we know that we are going to, in 2 or 3 years, be able to keep it going?
First, you believe you can do it.
Right.
If you don't believe you can do it, probably not going to do
But I think you could.
Second.
But Dan, I would say that I think you believed you could do it the first time. I think we all believe we could do it the first time.
it. I don't want to go backwards.
No, I know,
debating
but
that issue,
I'm saying
because that's a whole different time.
I
And
know.
I don't want to go back there because there's a lot of economics, there's a lot of business model, there's a lot of overhead, there's a lot of mistakes made.
Right,
And
but
I've
the
admitted,
answer has
and I've
to be
admitted
more-
every one of those,
Right.
I think, and I don't really want to go back there.
Right, but your
Let me
answer
let me
has to
answer
be more than
your
that.
question. I'm going to just take a swag at this, but let's say there's $140,000 in the next 2 years in city budget. Let's say $100,000 that is maybe dedicated to some type of a facility or siding repair. Maybe $40,000 is in case the AC blows up. Now, I don't know if that's the right numbers, but let's say that is. And if the siding job is $300,000, that leaves a $200,000 hole. That's what the partners are going to raise. And we're not going to stop until it's done.
And the partners,
The partners, and I think but what we can't do is we can't act like we're not going to do something. You won't get the interest from the others. So there's this leap of faith. I'm sorry, it takes some of that to
It's a
get
chicken
this
and-
done.
I mean, it really is.
Because I can guarantee you, if you don't move forward, you won't get it done. But if you do move forward, you're going to get the Confederated Tribe, you're going to get the Cabana Fund again, you're going to get the Lennox Foundation, who we're talking to again, you're going to go back to Juan Young, you're going to go get other grants, and you're going to succeed. But if you don't step out, you won't.
And they want to see the processes going before they
That's right.
jump on.
And you've
Yes.
got to see that process, and we're to the point where the internal content is there, the programming is there, the technology is there, everything is there. What we needed, quite frankly, I believe, to succeed is we need a commitment from the city. We need that financial commitment through the budget process, and we need a political commitment from you folks. And if we have those two things, and I'm the eternal optimist, but we've done everything we said we were going to do.
And
this
I'm
last time.
not at all saying we
That's
should
how
be
we'll
moving
succeed.
forward. I fully agree we should be moving forward, and I fully agree that we should be focused on this task, which is to open the center and to get the partners that we need to do that. I think us putting $140,000 in a 2-year budget is a little different than CHP saying, "Well, we think we can get it." So that's all I'm saying. There's we got to move towards that, but
You don't have to spend it. You won't spend it until we've got
Until
it.
you've got
See,
it,
is the
yeah.
protection you have, and that's I think the time frame that Scott alluded to. That we know we have the commitment, but it's this year we're going to do the smaller fixes, the safety things that get this
Yeah.
ready for Octa. But what that other commitment does of the 140, it gives us this. Now we can go out and write grants, and we can say that we have a city commitment, and we can get that match. I really believe it's the right way to get that done to where it's not the full burden of the city, which I don't think it should be.
we have to be open to get sales before we have any money to give back. That's simple. And without opening, we can't get the partners. And even the Confederated
kind of
Tribes, they wanted to know, when are you opening? I mean, no one wants to be there if we're not going to open.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a grand opening. I'm looking more of it being like a soft opening
Yeah.
and just open the doors. And,
But we want it safe and done right. We don't want to overspeak. We're not interested in that. We want sustainable.
This isn't the agenda. This isn't the specific agenda item tonight, but in what we've all talked about for the Interpretive Center, and even what you are stating tonight about our vision of that Interpretive Center, I want you to keep thinking about the trolley, which we all need to, and it's going to come up, and it's going to continue to come up. But in pretty much the entire recent history of this city, the Interpretive Center has acted as the core for the city's historic attractions for the most part, with the trolley linking all of them together. That's all fell apart. And it's all fell apart partly because of the individual museums not being able to continue in the way that they wanted to, and the city's inability to really fund the trolley at the way that we want to. You know, in order for us to even get back to where we were as a city, not just the interpretive center, is way more than just the $300,000 we're talking about in this paper. I mean, it's huge, and you know, I'm the reason I think we have to move so cautiously is we're not just talking about the interpretive center. I mean, the interpretive center doesn't survive if it's on its own, and the other entities in this city don't survive if they're on their own either. How do we? And I think this is for all of us to really start thinking about how do we make sure that we are thinking about all of these entities and their survival. Whether the trolley plays a piece in that, I don't know yet. But these entities have to rely on each other and have to grow and move forward. And we've taken a lot of steps forward and a lot of steps back, and we have to get to a point. And so that's kind of why I'm asking this question. We really have to think about all these things, not just the interpretive center building. So I don't know if you have a general comment about that, but
I do. I really do, because my whole thing, the whole reason I'm working so hard to open is for our whole city, because I believe we're stronger together than apart. I feel like we're the gateway, and I feel like we can bring people through. In one of the business plans, one of the visions I had was, you know, they go through the center, they end on the terrace, and they're in Oregon City. Dr. McLaughlin greets them, hops the trolley, and takes them through the town. Well, I also talked about, Dan and I have talked about, once we open and, you know, figure out just how much the market will bear to charge for a ticket and what we can give them in a value and different events and programming, then, you know, why couldn't part of that admission go for the trolley? Or, you know, but we have to open to get some money, get some, you know, interest again, and then we'll have something to work with and
That's
partner.
exactly what I was going to say. I think with value you can charge. No value you can't. It's a joke. So I think that if there's a value perceived, that maybe that the visitor would actually pay to ride the trolley.
Right.
And that value isn't just at the EOT. That value is to see the falls, and it's to go to the McLaughlin House, and it's to tour the rest of our town. Now, that's something that we as partners could flush out and see what's reasonable. Is it $1 per person? What, you know, what's that right number, but based on the value perceived. The other thing is there's either a declining cycle or a positive cycle. And I believe that if we do things right now and get this back going, I know there's efforts afoot for expanded hotels in our town. That's going to provide more motel tax, you know, that's going to provide maybe a little more support for things like the trolley. And so suddenly you've got then a positive momentum. And I think we're on the cusp of not just one new hotel, but maybe 2 or 3 new hotels in our town. So I think, you know, it's not to spend the money before we get it, but I think those are the kind of things that if we see some positive things start to happen, those tend to build. And then it's a matter of making the right decisions along the way.
The concern I have, though, is we're a summer away from selling the trolleys.
Well, I think we should probably rethink that.
So I mean,
Well,
so
we'll do all we can, though.
We'll try to add a little pressure to that. No offense there, Mr. Manager. But
I'm waiting for my turn.
Well, no, I'm sure you won't. No, but we'll try to. We're interested in getting visitors here. Okay, we're interested in running a really good visitor center, a really good interpretive center,
And promote our
doing
city.
programs. And I think,
And county and state,
and
actually.
we're going to move from 15,000 visitors to 20. You know, that we want to have those kind of things happen, and then, you know, the ripple, let it take care of
I
itself.
think we
But we're
want.
going to take an assertive effort, though, not just wait for the ripple, because we have, you know, the projector. We can do some things. We have software now that we can make our own little loops and promote. And so if we get open and I get that part done, then I can
And
get
just-
back out there. And
Just in this last 2 months, you know, Lewis and Clark Bank held a little evening thing there for their customers in the room. Jim Tompkins has been there every Tuesday night for the last month holding classes about Okta and training people and telling about it. That's the kind of thing that can continue, and that's, again, we've brainstormed with Scott. I mean, the Parks Department has got an excellent track record of facility use and facility maintenance and facility restoration. We need to bring this building back as a community space. Yes, its major function is an interpretive center on parallel history with the Native American and the Oregon Trail story. And yes, there's a visitor center there. But there's a lot more hours in the day than that. Then that can be managed and used, and it can be done in a way that benefits the whole community. That's what we've talked about. So I think we're right on the cusp of doing that. Anyway, thank you very
Thank you,
much for letting us kind of babble on.
Congratulations for the award that you got.
Yes,
Yes.
Well,
absolutely.
congratulations.
That's great.
Oh, David has something to comment on.
I'm wondering if someone here can help me understand when the trolleys the program was originally started. It sounds like there was a theory to connect the trail with some of the historic homes, with the museum. Was there sort of a circuit that they were supposed to?
Yeah, I mean, there's been various iterations of it, but I mean, at one time even, well, Dan, you got to correct. I mean, CHP actually did pay for the trolleys for a good portion of time when it did those loops. There was also past programs, multiple years, where we did joint ticket program, which was the Passport program, where you could buy a ticket and essentially go to all the attractions in the city. And so there has been those kind of activities in the past.
So let me ask if when things were maybe going at their best and it was at its peak, how many was the trolley sort of paying its way?
No.
How many
No.
did they use?
It never
No.
has.
No.
Okay,
It
okay.
never has.
And did it appear under ideal circumstances during those peak times that 3 of them were needed?
No.
Or would have one using it a lot or 3 using them not enough? I'm just
Well,
wondering about.
I think it was fairly consistent that they always needed one and a backup.
Yeah.
And I think even
Okay.
with 3, that's where we're at now, is 1 and 1 backup, right? I mean, because one of them.
Well, we have one of them that we actually want to liquidate
Right.
because it's just not, it's losing value and it's expensive to repair. And we were actually thinking of liquidating that sooner rather than later. I think there is one that's in pretty good shape, and we could hold off because we're going to be using it this summer. There is going to
Right.
be a trolley route. It's going to be an abbreviated route. And it's going to be
Right.
shorter than last year. And there isn't funding in the second year of our biennial budget. I can't see Dan from here, but I know he can hear me. So if you want a trolley,
We know where you
come
can buy
talk to
one.
me. You know,
I don't know if it warrants a separate work session, but at least the tourism entities. I know the trolley was discussed recently at the transportation. What do we call it? Advisory Council, I think. Committee. Okay, and but the tourism community, we've all kind of talked about it briefly, etc. But I think that, and maybe this is separate from a work session here, but I think the partners that we're talking about that have vested interest in keeping the interpretive center alive, and all the other partners, including those that are involved in moving forward on Willamette Falls Legacy Project and all these things. I mean, these, we don't want to move forward on all these major tourism kind of components in the city and then get rid of the one thing that has been the tie of all of them together. So,
I want to suggest to you that these trolleys, part of the reason they haven't been penciling for the city is that they are not designed for our weather and our elements, and so they require a lot of expensive storage, and they're wood, so there's the repair and humidity issues and all of that. So there may be a way to liquidate those, and I don't want to say this to scare people. I'm just saying if we do have a need, and let's say that the end of the trail becomes very successful, more so than we have seen in the past, in a way that all of us would be just thrilled and pleased. And let's say that in a few years we have something for people to really see at the end of at the falls. And then we have that circuit that's sort of obvious to all of us. and we decide, hey, you know, we need a shuttle service. I'd rather stop talking about trolleys
Right.
and start talking about how to move people.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
And then, so I just want to say that selling the trolleys or closing that program, as the commission has directed through the budget process, does not foreclose or I think in any way limit our ability to resuscitate a program that would be effective. In fact, the program we now have, we know one of its initial failings was that it wasn't ever funded on a sustainable way with money we could all count on and identify. So if we were to bring something back, I'm not interested in bringing that back. I want to bring back something that will work. You know what I mean? Something that will work and pay its way.
Yeah.
So I think that just don't give up on the city being a partner for that kind of thing, even if it's not in the traditional sense of the trolley that we see now, because I still think we can address that.
Right.
Yeah.
That will move on to the vertical housing development zone and Eric Underwood.
I'd like to say my consultant's not here, and I'd like to pull it from Just kidding.
You can say it.
Yeah, I'll say it.
Yeah, go
You're right. Staff's not here. But I do have Lloyd, so no, I'll do that. Lloyd's gonna partner with me here. I just wanted to introduce this program to the commission tonight. I think it's a worthwhile program. We've been doing some research on it, and it could act as an incentive program for redevelopment in our downtown primarily. It's very consistent with the commission's goals to try to establish residential development downtown. And so I wanted to just kind of go over, I've got a lengthy staff report, but I put it in a PowerPoint presentation, just kind of an executive summary. So I just want to go to the high points of that and be able to answer any questions. And Lloyd's going to assist me here.
Our monitor's not.
I'm sorry, it's not. Keep going, Eric.
Okay. So the program is the Vertical Housing Development Zone, which I like to refer to as the VHDZ and OC. Okay. And it's administered by the state. So it's actually designated by the state as well. And so what we would do is apply through their application process, and then they would review that application and ultimately designate our zone. It is a program that enables municipalities to reinvest in the district and create a special district, kind of an overlay over our existing zoning. It would work to encourage a mixed-use type development, so both residential and commercial, so it doesn't ignore either one of those. And ultimately, the result would be a higher density in our downtown, for both commercial and residential. Once we apply and we're approved and the zone is established, then individual projects have to apply through the state to become to certify their project.
There we go. Woohoo!
Okay.
All right. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. So each individual project is certified through the state. Once it is certified, then they have an opportunity to receive a property tax abatement of up to 80%. Now that abatement is on the building only. It doesn't include the land. And it abates taxes on the additional value that's created from the project. But the zone must be in a qualifying area, and they have certain criteria that we'd have to meet to qualify. And they leave it pretty broad. The criteria is pretty broad for a lot of other cities to take part in the program. So the qualifying areas include you'd have to be defined as an existing central business district or downtown area according to the jurisdiction zoning. You'd have to be in a light rail station area, a transit-oriented development district, a core area of an urban center, a defined central city, such as Portland, a regional center, a town center, Main Street or station community in the Metro 2040 Regional Growth Concept Plan. or an area that meets the definition of special transportation area within the Oregon Highway Plan. And doing some initial review, we meet at least three of those. Well, at least three, yeah. So we would, it'd be a great chance that we would qualify for the zone. So this is just a proposed map, just thinking about the boundaries that we could draw up for this zone. I've included the former Blue Heron site as maybe a future area to consider, but right now, with the visioning process that's beginning, I don't believe it'd be very conducive to put that in, to include that at this point, because that's almost assuming a certain type of zone that's going to
Right.
Allow residential.
Yeah, we're
And
not
so
there yet.
I think we need to go through the visioning process. And plus, we don't have an established need for that area, whereas the other areas in downtown do have that established need, I believe. The map here is also consistent with the regional center. So the way our regional center boundaries are drawn up, this is entirely within the regional center. So I made sure that that would qualify there. Yes.
How does that boundary fit with our new neighborhood boundary?
We don't have a
Well,
neighborhood yet, do we?
Well, no, but I mean, if we, I mean, have we thought about the fact that if that new neighborhood is formed, is that boundary similar to that new neighborhood in terms of the? And we might want to think about that. I'm not sure.
Well, I would have to think about that. I haven't seen the boundary for the,
Right.
the new neighborhood.
It's
so
essentially,
that'd be
I
something-
mean, it's close to the same, but
It'd probably be easier for them to amend their boundary than it would be for us to amend our.
right. It's just a thought. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
it might be
This
good to
is-
have them
Sure.
connected if they're
Yeah, they're definitely going to
Basically,
be related.
what this is our mixed-use downtown zone.
right.
That's what this is. So this next slide is just kind of an example of how it would work. Don't pay too close attention to the numbers. You know, we're just trying to get some broad estimates here. But you know, you have your base, which is your ground level, and over on the left-hand side there, assuming a certain taxing value there. And as you build up, as you build additional levels, it creates additional value that would be taxed. So it goes up to 80%, so meaning 4 floors above the base would be the maximum. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, the numbers are more for the delta, showing you these are estimates, by the way, almost imaginary numbers, showing you the scale. Our single-story buildings on average downtown, that's what this 173,224 is. That's the average of a single average building tax value, not the land tax, just the structure. So take that number and use that as an estimate to throw up more, just showing you the delta or the change in value you can expect. And those numbers are both low. That's not your take home. That's not what you get out of taxes. That's the disclaimer.
And these next couple of slides are just some examples of what's occurring in the region. This one is from the city of Hillsborough. On the left there, you see the original bank building that was there on the corner of 4th Street, I believe it is. This is kind of the front and the back view there. And on the right is what they're proposing to construct because of the vertical housing development zone.
Good to note that it's commercial. Every first level has to be commercial with residential above it.
To have 50% commercial on the street frontage, right? This is an example a little closer in Milwaukee. They've done very well with the program. So that would be an example of 60% tax abatement there. And then in Gresham, if anyone's been to Gresham Station out there. So kind of the next steps, you know, we're seeking direction from the commission to move forward in the application process. We'd like to get this going. I think we have a couple of projects that would like to use, potential projects that would like to use this credit. it would work to maybe produce a better product in the end result. It's an incentive program that wouldn't cost us hardly any funds. We have a total of $650 one-time payment. If the commission does give us direction to move forward, we would have to, it's like an urban renewal zone, we'd have to notify the overlapping taxing districts and talk with them about that, and they can opt in or they can opt out at any time as well. But really, the way the map is proposed, it's all entirely within the urban renewal district, so it's not going to impact the overlapping taxing districts, because they won't be receiving any tax revenues until the urban renewal district is closed. We would meet with them as needed. We'd have to notice, and then we would be open and willing to meet with them and talk with them more about the program and explain it to them. If we do have them on board, then we would come back to the commission seeking an adoption of a resolution that would go with our application. That's a requirement. And then we complete that application. We would wait for approval, which maximum it would be about 60 days. But in talking with the State Department, they said that it could be a lot sooner than that. It could be as soon as 30 days. And then Oregon Housing and Community Services Department will notify the county assessor and get everything set up there. So I should mention that, and I don't know if I stated this before, but it is, once a project is certified and starts receiving the tax abatement, they do that for a period of 10 years. And then after that 10-year period, the district or the taxing jurisdictions will receive the full amount of the taxing value.
So it automatically stops at 10 years?
It'll automatically stop at 10 years. And another thing I should mention, too, is that this program is due to sunset January 1 of 2016. So at that time, they will no longer be accepting any other applications, but they will be honoring the 10-year commitment to the tax abatement. So,
if I might ask a question, I mean, it's wholly within the urban renewal district. They get the, let's say a development gets the abatement. Does that money go back to the taxing districts even though the urban renewal district is open?
No, it does not. It will not go back to the taxing districts until the urban renewal district is closed.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
But when it is closed,
Well, I understand. I know. Yeah.
there's a
lot
little more at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah, there's going to be more, and you're going to encourage other development and redevelopment with this program, and so.
Could you go back to your map? Yeah. The area there in the purple area where you have the kind of the, I don't know, the jaw of the alligator there that's in purple, that's outside of the outside of it. Is there a specific reason that's outside? You see what I mean?
The purple area?
I presume the solid black line represents the boundary.
That represents the proposed boundary.
And then around our jug handle and over towards the river and
Treatment plant.
And so forth.
Right.
The reasons those are out, I'm just curious as to why those are out.
They're not zone mixed use downtown.
So that's our current zoning.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So
And Mayor, just so we're clear, we're not proposing to include the Willamette Falls
yeah,
site.
we're not.
No, I understand
yeah,
that
right.
too, at this point.
So it has to be zoned where you're able to construct both residential and commercial.
Well, I've got a bit of a question there because it does look like you've got the, as I see it, you've got the landfill site included, and yet what's the possibility of actually building vertically that high on a landfill?
Depending on the footings or the foundation that they pour, you could. I mean, there's a chance for multi-story office there with residential. So it'd probably be a little more expensive to do that, but it's possible. So, and then there again, this type of incentive would maybe encourage folks to actually do that, where they would get enough tax break, where they would want to do that type of development out there.
I thought that site we were told could never be used for housing or even hotels.
I think the preliminary discussions we had with the Department of Environmental Quality was concerning the methane.
Right.
So there are ways to capture that. There were concerns about first floor and confined spaces. We did look at multi-story.
So
but
if you're up above,
it's to stop the methane from accumulating in close places.
If you're high enough,
you might be high enough down on the first floor.
Yes.
So
you're right.
it could be an option.
Right.
It's just one we haven't pursued because that wasn't any of the proposals that we looked at.
Okay.
All right, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Is there a minimum or maximum density tied to having this designation?
No, there's not.
So we don't have to put in 4 buildings or less than whatever.
No.
And then the second thing is, I noticed you said 650, so that means you're not going to have any low-income housing in this. Is that correct? Because I thought that it came to 750, it was low-income. Correct.
Yes, so actually, that's for project monitoring. So if a low-income project comes in and we approve it through land use, and it's submitted for certification through the state, then they require an extra $100 for monitoring that.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Any more questions?
Well, I do, but take me step by step.
okay.
So, urban renewal,
Right.
you can request urban renewal monies for projects. And then there's also this on top of it, and it's a tax abatement.
Right.
Which means it's,
Well, we would forego collecting a certain amount of property tax off the building for a 10-year period. So, and the minimum would be 20%. So if they build,
okay.
yeah,
There's a minimum.
yeah.
Okay.
So, but if a project came in because of this incentive,
Yes.
they're going to add 120% for property tax value in the district because they will build that ground level and then
Okay.
the next level above.
So is there any downside to doing this?
Not that I see.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't come across any downside yet.
The opportunity cost, the foregone collection you're not making,
The 650?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
the 80% you're not collecting.
But then again, that ends in 10 years, so we'll
Right.
still have our urban renewal district for many more years than that, and we'll be collecting the 100% value after that 10 years on that project.
Okay.
So that was part of my question when I was asking minimum or maximum. Is there a downside? So if we never do this, are we keeping anything else from coming in and doing something else?
We might. I mean, I know there's interest. There's been some folks that I've talked to that say, if you get this on, then we would like to build here.
Oh, but I mean the opposite. I mean, if we get this on, will we stop anyone else?
It doesn't preclude the private market.
It doesn't. It doesn't
So like if
impact it either.
Nordstrom wants to build a big store
Right.
downtown,
Right,
we
no.
can't. Okay.
Okay.
The other illuminating thing is the other cities that have this. Not every other, but there's a good list of 8 to 10 in the metro area that are all using this. Well, we're competing with them for those developers, so to
Right.
not have this tool,
Right.
they go to Gresham, they go to Hillsborough,
Right.
they go to Milwaukee.
And Hillsborough has been very successful with this program, and they're also in the process of applying for another zone.
Okay.
It's been so successful.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good, thanks.
You get the nod from me.
So is that a consensus of the commission that we should move forward with
Yes.
this? Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
Very good.
Thank you.
Insurance coverage for neighborhood associations of Oregon City. Nancy Ide.
Alrighty, one moment, please. Bring up some light for you. Alrighty. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. The purpose of tonight's work session on the subject of neighborhood insurance is to discuss whether you wish to provide reimbursement to the neighborhood associations for liability and/or directors and officers' insurance costs. As you recall, late last year, the CIC began to ask questions on whether the neighborhoods were covered under the city's liability insurance. And I'm sorry, I forgot to timestamp this for you. There you go. the commission held a work session in January to discuss the matter, and you agreed at that time that the neighborhood associations should remain autonomous in nature to maintain their freedom to operate independently and to provide recommendations to the commission on land use matters. Also at that time, we learned that providing insurance for a group or an event occurred when there was a partnership with that group or the group was an instrumentality of the city. So that's when we provided that insurance for them. The city's insurance company confirmed this, as it does not provide coverage for neighborhood associations because they're not entities of the city. It's just sort of a given with city-county insurance all throughout the state. So in seeking options for the associations, the commission suggested reimbursing the neighborhoods for insurance costs if they would purchase their own insurance. There was some interest in this, and it was discussed at neighborhood meetings, and then members of the neighborhoods brought that forward to the CIC. However, the city attorney's office has indicated that whether the city pays for the insurance outright or whether they reimburse the association for the costs, it's all the same thing. It's providing payment for the insurance, and it identifies the associations as instrumentalities of the city. So, according to our city attorney, this would trigger an obligation to ensure that we act consistent with state law, which would include following public contracting rules, non-discrimination, free speech, and other concerns. It would also require significant ongoing trainings to the association members in all of these laws, and it would compromise the independence of these bodies and their voice on land use matters. The impact on staff time would require an additional employee to meet these requirements, which would of course mean that funds would need to be identified in the city's budget for another full-time employee. So staff is looking to the commission for direction on this matter this evening. We've presented you the information that we've gathered so far, and the city manager and the city attorney are also here to answer any of your questions that you might have.
You're not asking for direction, though. Because we can't, right?
Well, you just gave us direction.
Consensus, you can have consensus.
We're trying to see if there's a consensus. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The staff, me included, we understand this issue. I think we've had a number of meetings with people who feel strongly about it on both sides. Part of what you pay us for is a recommendation. Our recommendation is not to do this. But we're serve at your direction, so if there's a consensus that we do it, we will certainly do our best.
It surprises me that we would need a full-time staff person to do this. Could you explain to me why that would be the case?
Nancy can.
It would be more or less in the training aspect. What you have to remember that right now we're already Katie Riggs her position was the CIC and the neighborhood associations was just added to an already full-time position, and so she's overwhelmed a bit with the work in addition to any trainings that would have to be ongoing to address the neighborhood associations' understanding of public contracting laws and public meetings laws and all those records laws that they have to follow as well. So, we are kind of bordering right now on almost making them instrumentalities by requiring them to follow the meetings and the records laws already. So going a step further would push them over the line.
Eddie Munn.
I think that, I get the whole training piece of it. I think it could be done. The CIC could take a bigger role in doing that. That could be part of their responsibility. But the bottom line is, if they feel like they're needing this protection, we need to either say you're not going to be covered or you are, and let them know, and they can make their own decision, because a lot of people already think they're covered because, many years ago they were told they were covered by former employees. So We just need to be very clear. I think it could be done. Go ahead.
Well, I guess my question is, in our looking at this, did we find any cities that were providing this to other neighborhood associations?
Yes, we found one in the state. We did a statewide search, and the city of Milwaukee actually provides event insurance for their neighborhood associations. It's not a blanket like directors and officers. So what it appears that our neighborhoods are looking for is not what Milwaukee covers.
In the case of the officer insurance, is that liability insurance in case they're going to get sued for something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I make a distinction between the two, actually. I mean, event insurance where they're having their own internal cleanup or something of that nature, I think is a very different thing.
Right.
And does that require a whole lot of training? Probably not. I mean...
Would it require insurance?
No, I understand that, but you're talking about training, and I presume that's the issue of liability in terms of what...
Well, we would be treating neighborhood associations in the same way that we would be treating boards and committees. So let's just take Transportation Advisory Committee, for instance, or even the CIC. We provide a training booklet that we keep updated on a regular basis. This last year, we launched a training video. I've gone to several board and committee meetings to offer training for new members. We would need to maintain the list of all the members. I don't know how we would do that. Providing communications and all sorts of that, just the communication end of it, and keeping people informed of events and different things would be part of this position as well.
But are the same requirements there of event insurance versus general liability insurance? I mean, are those requirements so onerous that we couldn't do it?
Well, I think it goes back to taking the voice away from the neighborhoods. If they're an instrumentality of the city, then do they truly have an independent voice? Or in a court of law, for instance, would a judge say to you, well, you're just basically telling them what to say, or you're giving them because they're an entity of the city, will they continue to have their independent voice?
Well, but I don't see that in the case of an event. That's event
insurance.
insurance. I mean, that's what I'm talking about.
Events,
that's what I'm talking about. Is event insurance. Event insurance.
They can go out and get their own event insurance
They can.
not be under that blanket of the city. Is that correct?
That's right. If they're independent of the city, they can do whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I think we should not have to make them obey all the public rules that we're making them do now. I mean, it's like we have them halfway in the boat, but now we're going to kick you out. So, I mean, we just have to decide. Because right now they have to obey the open meetings laws and publishing agendas and.
All the bylaws differ a great deal in what they do. I think they're just basically following whatever their individual bylaws state that they do.
We got into that, a year ago, and they were told they had to obey the public open laws.
If I can...
Please.
Okay. I was just talking to Carrie here, and the commission was provided legal advice last year regarding that, as were staff, and that's tied to the land use function, and that function only. So that's why they're required to follow the open meetings. It's because of that land use piece.
That was not made clear then.
Well,
Because that is not how I recall that.
I mean,
the attorney's here. We can ask again.
I mean, a lot of it triggered it was the Parkways Neighborhood Association and how they handled land use issues, actually.
Yeah.
Within a steering committee as opposed to the general meeting and so on. But the point is that wouldn't be the part of an event. Is there a reason we couldn't, in fact, reimburse them for an event insurance policy?
We could do that.
I didn't get the feeling the events is what they were worried about.
Okay, well,
No.
I think it's more of the meetings and what's said and not said. And I think what's interesting to note is the whole reason I think this discussion started was because some individuals were afraid of lawsuits that haven't happened. Now, someone brought up to me a good point. Well, we have fire insurance at our homes, and many of us have never had fires at our houses. But there have been many fires in the community. So our neighbors have had fires even if we haven't. Well, in all of our searches, we couldn't find another city that had experienced a lawsuit in one of its neighborhood associations. So that doesn't mean there's never going to be one.
No, because
but
we are a city of first.
That's right. Thanks for reminding. I hope the law. Now, of course, I know from being an attorney that anyone can sue anybody for anything. There is Rule 11 and some other
Yes.
prohibitions against
Yes.
frivolous lawsuits, which I think are may come into play in those situations. But I'd also like to suggest to you that it doesn't. If that fear is stopping people from serving, it's not permeating, at least in a way that I can see it. We actually have neighborhood associations, more of them, coming forward saying we want to be a neighborhood association. And we have, 200 different volunteers that serve, and a lot of them do have coverage. But we don't have a proliferation of these suits right now that are a problem. And we haven't found them in anywhere else in the state. So. And then the last thing, which is really telling to me that we found out really at the beginning, but I'm saying last thing because it's the last thing I'm going to say about it. When CIS won't provide insurance for it, that automatically tells me that might not be a place we want to be first, because this is a company that is made up of a pool of cities across the state that they provide us insurance for all kinds of things that, frankly, I think are pretty high risk and pretty imaginative at times. And if we can't get coverage for this from them, that ought to be a warning to us about where we're headed here. So that's all I got to say.
Kathy Roth.
Okay, I've got a couple of things. I think that maybe we should stop being so insular in our search, in that, maybe we should look outside of Oregon. There's things going on in other states that we might want to take a look at. So there's that. The second thing is, I do know of people that are leaving neighborhood service because of this issue, and some really good public servants. And the third thing is there a problem, other than the obvious, in providing neighborhood insurance to neighborhoods that request it, and like these neighborhoods that the meetings don't even happen, they wouldn't have a reason to request insurance because there's no meetings?
Well, it would be making those neighborhoods instrumentalities of the city. I mean, if
they don't have meetings and...
Well, they're all meeting now.
The ones that you're insuring would be. And
Right.
so then...
But like I went to a meeting 2 months ago that nobody ever showed up. Even the chair of the neighborhood didn't show up. So
what your question?
If they're not actively doing anything, I mean, they may say they're a neighborhood meeting and they do have a chair, but there's no meetings going on. What's the point in providing them insurance, or why would they even ask for insurance?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, I would agree with you. I don't see the point of. I mean, why would you want to spend money on insurance if the neighborhood is not very active at that time?
So what would there be a problem with doing it that way? Say Park Place, which is very active, requests the insurance, and somebody else that isn't active at all doesn't.
Then the city's not looking at the neighborhoods as equals.
Yeah.
They're
Right.
providing insurance to one and not the other, and so that's a mess.
And you have the same thing. You insure one when they stop having meetings, but they're already insured.
The crux of the issue is whether or not you want to provide the insurance bad enough to make them instrumentalities of the city. That's the question. And making them instrumentalities has the benefit of allowing you to provide them insurance and the additional training and other things that go with the instrumentality assignment. But, I think someone asked me, gosh, what are our options? Is there a way to get the insurance without becoming an instrumentality? And not that we can find. So that's the rub.
When I look at the amount of money that's going to have to be spent on this, and then I think about the autonomy that the neighborhood associations may lose, and how important it is to have independent neighborhood associations that can meet with each other and, vet different issues. And then I look to see if there are concern founded in, real incidences. And it would be interesting to look and see if there's anything outside the state. Like Kathy said, I agree with that. And what is the real concern? Is things being said about other people? Is it slander at these neighborhood associations? Is that what people are worried about being sued for? It may sound kind of trite, but let's just be nicer to each other. Is it worth spending all the money and losing autonomy?
I don't think ensuring bad behavior is going to make us nicer.
Right.
That's one of the concerns I have.
It may make
Maybe
it
it's
worse.
also.
So I'll invite you in a minute, but we got people up here. Why don't you go ahead and put it on the forum, and then you get officially on here. Betty Mum.
Well, the other piece too is, we're requiring neighborhoods to send their newsletters or their postcards to the city, so the city can manage mailing those. And, it just seems kind of weird that we're doing half and not the other. So I go back to, we either acknowledge the neighborhoods and support them, or we unacknowledge them, however we do that, let them know that they're, a value to us, and we have the CIC do all the land use. So, there's my thoughts.
We'll go to, you're on, but invite Tom O'Brien up. Yeah.
No, I'm not. I don't think I'm on. I'm done.
You're on this.
No, you're not.
Okay.
Tom O'Brien?
Good evening, Commissioners and Mayor and staff. I just wanted to add a couple of points that I think are worth considering. I'm aware, as you are, that we have a very litigious society. And one of the things that I find very disturbing is that we have our goal 4 that we've chosen to involve citizens, get people involved. And part of the rationale and reasoning behind even holding neighborhood association meetings and doing land use is LCDC's Title I. We have a situation in our city right now where we have a neighborhood association that has been informed by the facility where they have held their meetings for years that they are no longer welcome because they are not insured. Rivercrest neighborhood has no place to meet as a neighborhood association. How can they function in their role as a neighborhood association if they can't meet? Issue 1. Issue 2. Last night we had our CIC meeting, and I'm sorry that none of you were able to attend. Katie shared with us the biennium budget for this coming fiscal year and the following year. Our expenses, our allocation for getting information out to our citizens regarding neighborhood association meetings, we currently allow $1.74, excuse me, check my numbers, $1.73.6111 per household per year. Now, I don't know how you do a very good job of communicating and even getting a postcard out the door if you're expecting. We cut down in our neighborhood from what we used to have as a newsletter. We cut back to a postcard. The next step we had to do to cut budget was to reduce our meetings from 5 to 4 a year. Our neighborhood associations are ineffective for several reasons, and part of it is underfunding. The funding for this new budget coming up, we've got $25,000 this current fiscal year. We got $25,500 for the whole shoot and match this coming 2 years. It doesn't increase in the second year. When I take a look at that cost of living at 2% the first year, nothing the following. And as we get newer homes, which my neighborhood is tremendously impacted, as is Tower Vista, those additional costs of those homes have to come out of that overall budget for the entire neighborhood association program. So we're really reducing as, we're at a break even. If we add in the next 2 years 289 homes, we're back to the $1.73 that we're at right now to fund a mailing. I mean, printing is going up, let's face it, postage is going up. We're not getting there, folks. So, but I want you to know that because of the fact that one church has determined that they are not going to any longer allow us to use their facility, we know we have a strong network of churches. We have a number of neighborhoods that meet at churches, my own included. I'm concerned about that. So I just share that.
I presume this could be something that was handled by event insurance, right? I mean, I would guess the meeting is an event.
Meeting is an event.
So I mean, as distinct from the liability insurance, which I think is where all the concerns are coming from. So, I mean, I think it's a possibility to actually support event insurance.
Yeah.
Whether it be through a reimbursement or something else, leaving the liability insurance out of the picture.
If that's what the neighborhoods are asking for, but it's my understanding that the concern was more for the directors and officers. That's what was expressed to the CIC.
I understood that as well.
At this point, I personally would not have any interest in insurance. But if I'm faced with a situation where our neighborhood cannot exist,
Right.
because our church that we're using comes to us and says, without insurance, you don't come here.
Right. I have a quick question. So did the church give you a reason, for instance, like if somebody trips and falls, would it not be covered under their insurance? They'd want it to be covered under the neighborhood?
I can't speak to that.
Okay.
It was brought up.
I'd
It was
be
brought up by the
interested in knowing.
Rivercrest representatives to the CIC that they are looking for a new home because they were thrown out because of the insurance issue.
Bob Mahoney.
I have
go ahead.
Response to the budget is that the $25,000 that's there for newsletters is upon the request of the neighborhood to request the money to spend on newsletters, and we've never spent that $25,000. That's why we kept it 25. It's never been fully spent, which means the neighborhoods haven't been using it. So they have to request it, and then it gets spent.
Well, we've gone over budget the last several years.
Well, your neighborhood, but
because we tried to get a newsletter out,
right,
and then we
but
cut
that's
back
why
from a
that's why
newsletter to a
it's there.
postcard.
That's why it
And
did
we
go
keep
up.
being told, Katie's explained to us, as has her predecessor, that you have this much funds allocated, and here's where you're at. You don't have enough to send a mailing out for your last meeting.
So the issue is not that there's not enough money there. The issue is that it's being, some neighborhoods are using it and some are not.
Some are not using it, although, the discussion was brought up last evening. Kanema has historically printed at their own cost and gone around door to door rather than using the Postal Service and the city's printer. I have had, for the work parties that we've conducted at Filbert Run Park, I've taken those costs out of my own personal pocket, gone to the print shop, had invitations and flyers printed up, walked around the neighborhood with my wife and several other volunteers, handing them out door to door in order to get people to come and participate in a neighborhood project. I'm willing to do those kinds of things on a somewhat basis, but it was brought up last night by the folks from Kanema that, it might be nice if they could at least get a reimbursement for REMA paper once in a while, since, they're printing them up on their own printers with their own ink and their own paper. And,
Well, they
that's
do
that's
have the
never
option.
something
They
that's
do,
been
it's
brought up.
there, it's in the
They have
budget.
the option to send it to the city and have it done that way.
Well, I guess the question is, and then that's been parceled off into how much each neighborhood could get, and so maybe it's a case of how it's allocated.
Mayor, that gets back to the sending them to us, because if it's city dollars that are used for it, we have to review it because it has to be, as you know, politically neutral. So we can't. And that's the beauty
Well,
of,
and how is it
frankly,
if you're
Yeah,
spending
I don't have a problem
$5,000
with it,
for
but
one
I
neighborhood
can't
and
very
$2
well
for the
operate
other?
on $1.73 per household per year.
if I'd like to
You know,
finish though,
just-
because it's again, it's just the same thing. Mr. O'Brien just mentioned people using their own printers. That's great. That's their free speech rights. They when they're doing that, they're not worried about the city. But when you accept the city dollar, then we have all those laws that go with it. And same election laws we're dealing with right now on our water rate issue, why we don't print those certain materials.
I would have been
that
happy to
they're-
have you print up the things that I paid for, but it's not in the budget.
Well,
Yes,
So
it is in
the
the
I can't even
budget.
send the postcards out to the meetings.
But the bottom line is, Kenema does have money in the budget
It is
to
in the
do
budget.
that.
Yeah.
They have money in the
They-
budget that's not
they-
being used.
they just
Katie
have-
revealed last night that the other organizations can opt in to try and use some of
Right.
that, so that it is used by the end of the year.
Yes,
But see, we have not had that communication previously.
yeah,
As you know, Betty, when you were on the,
yes,
we received a worksheet, maybe,
yes.
that said you had X number of dollars left, and that's all, you're through for the year, and it's only March.
Right, right. So Kenema does have the option. There is money in there.
Yes, there's money there if they wish to use it.
So it's, I think when you get close to the end, if your other neighborhoods are not using their money,
Our
it
best-
could be.
Our biggest and best neighborhood, McLaughlin, came to the meeting last night requesting additional CIC funds because they don't have enough to send out their mailings. And they've got income from snow cones, they've got income from merchants. We don't even have merchants in our neighborhood. We don't get free cookies
Sure
for
not
our
talking
meetings.
about insurance,
You
are
ever
we?
come to our meetings, you don't get free cookies.
We're kind of off the agenda topic,
Yeah.
but that's okay, because we'll have the budget document coming before this commission a little later, so. Bob Mahoney and Dan
Thank you.
Fowler.
Thank you.
Nobody told me this was going to be formal, black tie. Put a
Who do you see up here with a black tie?
Yeah.
Other than manager, and this isn't even black.
You first to me.
No, order your calls.
Oh, okay. Well, you're looking at a cheerleader for Oregon City. And I am also a member of the Planning Commission and the Traffic Advisory Board, and I pay the bills. And I do not want to see the neighborhood associations be an instrument of the community. I think it's divisive. I want to see you people be an instrument of the city. Public participation, public involvement at the ballot box. That's where it belongs. Okay. Now, I might think that I'm negative about the neighborhood association. I'm not. But I don't really think that they should be. The Planning Commission and the Traffic Advisory Board are good people. I mean, they are really excellent people. And I've been in this business a while to know they're genuine. They're not disingenuous. And they represent the city with consistency and with skill. And it's not rocket science. None of us are rocket scientists. We don't all have the answers, and we make mistakes. But we are the instruments of the city because you have created them by law. We have appointed us by law, and I don't see that the neighborhood associations should be thought of anything other than people participating to get information, to participate in their government, but not in a legal manner. So I don't think we ought to project them into the scheme of things with the idea that they're going to represent the city in some sort of a legal manner. My choice of words is probably not what they should be, but anyway, I think that the neighborhood associations ought to be just exactly what they are. They ought to be a place where people can gather and get information. And you talk about putting out notices of public hearing. My goodness gracious, what the Planning Commission goes through to get the word out to as many people as they possibly can. And 90% of the people that appear before us say, why didn't you tell us? Well,
Yes.
they weren't paying attention to their Twitter, or their tweeter, or their computer, or their email, We've got 10,000 different ways that we can look at each other, and we still don't communicate. I have coffee in the morning with people that are doing this to me, and I can't understand a word they have because I don't have one. I'm just looking at them in the eyes saying, when are you going to talk to me? You see, I don't think these neighborhood associations really want to be an extension of the city. I don't think so. I think this is a ghost that we're shadow boxing with. So I think we ought to keep it real. I think one of the fine things that we could do for the neighborhood associates is have that gentleman right there and his fine police force show up every once in a while and say, folks, this is what we're doing. We're driving by your house and we're checking and we're taking license plate numbers.
Can you text me that?
Listen, I got about 3 or 4 of them that I'll get them to you. Okay, I've had my say. Thank you very kindly.
Thank you.
And it's really been a privilege. Well, I shouldn't say it is a privilege. If I say it's been a privilege, somebody's going to say goodbye to me. But it's really a privilege to serve this city. We should all be proud of each other because of what we're doing. Okay, and another thing, if you extend to these neighborhood associations and make them an instrument of your policies and stuff like that, then I want you to double the salary of all your department heads and all your employees, because they're going to have to go out to these meetings and they're going to have to, as instruments, they're going to have to participate with the citizen advisor or these neighborhood association. The question is, do we want, the tail wagging the dog? You are the people that I want representing me right here, and I'll do that through the ballot box. Okay, and I saw Mr. Blaine Meyer the other day. Some innuendos made, and I agree and support him 100%. Representative government. When you're in command, right, Chief? Absolutely. Okay, thank you very kindly.
Okay, thank you.
And Betty, I'm going to put my hat on for you.
I'll wait for you to walk away, and I need to respond to something, but I don't want you to respond back. The neighborhood associations have been formed really to address State Goal 1, isn't that right?
No.
No, it's the CIC.
The CIC
They
is
report
still-
to, the neighborhood associations report.
No, I understand that, but the neighborhood associations came into being for public involvement purposes.
That's correct.
Yeah, and the point is that we do expect them to have an active voice. In fact, when a development is occurring, we oftentimes request a developer to go to the neighborhood associations and talk to them.
Yeah.
It's not a ballot box issue, and so it's not a club out there. From our standpoint, they're supposed to be addressing land use issues. Am I right?
Yes.
I'm asking our attorney.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're right.
Okay, good.
I wasn't
So-
sure. I was looking at Mary.
No, Gary. I was looking. He's an ex-lawyer. We don't look to him for legal advice. But anyway, I mean that's the purpose of the neighborhood associations. It's not just the ballot box. It's the capability of the neighborhoods to comment in terms of what land use activities are occurring in their neighborhoods and respond to it. So in any way, I just said I wanted you to walk away before I made that comment. And now we'll go to Dan Fowler. That's true.
That's dirty pool, Deb.
That's
I'll take care of it, Bob. I wanted to give just a little bit of history because I happen to be the mayor that worked to establish the neighborhood associations. And when I went to a conference back in Missouri, there was neighborhood associations everywhere in the town of Independence, Missouri. And I thought, wow, what a great way to foster citizen involvement. And the neighborhood associations at that time, we envisioned them being just community, people within a neighborhood that cared about where they lived. And we wanted them to come together and talk about relevant issues for their neighborhood. Whether you needed a stop sign in the corner, whether the park needed to be mowed more often, whatever was relevant within their neighborhood, that was just the concept. It was not formal. It was meant to be informal. It was not to turn the neighborhood association into a planning commission or the CIC into a planning commission. So I think you're right. I think by the developments that happen that are required to go to the neighborhood associations, I think that's absolutely right because it relates to the neighborhood. How they respond to that should be through the planning commission.
Well, that's how it's done.
They should, as a committee, as a representative of the neighborhood, go speaks, put a letter in, whatever. They should fit back into the basic city process. So it was really a simple idea that when I look at it and think about all the legalities and all the fighting and everything that's been going on for years, it's a travesty because it's so far from what was meant to be something simple and pure and caring about just the area where you lived. And so I hope we can get back to that. So, I mean, I would definitely say make it clear you don't have insurance. Now, some homeowners policies, I checked with my homeowners policy because I'm on a number of boards that are not paid. They're a volunteer board. My coverage extends to me as long as it's not in a paid position. That is something that every person on every board has every right to check with their homeowners policy to see if that happens. Some policies I think do, some don't. Find out. If you're worried about it as a citizen, don't serve. I mean, I hate to say it, but or take the risk. I mean, but I hope as a community, what you said, Commissioner Pauley, is right. Is my gosh, let's get off all this worry about suing and things. But okay, enough said about that. The other thing, though, in this day and age, I don't know who doesn't have email.
Right.
I would encourage the neighborhoods to just send emails out and try to. If somebody doesn't have an email, if you have 100 people in your neighborhood and you have 3 people that don't have email, send them a postcard.
We have a lot of people in our neighborhood that don't have email.
Then I think you should still do. I think that you should still do your very, very best to get people noticed. I do, but I'd try to use email as much as possible. But anyway, that's. But I believe that the neighborhoods are important. They should care about their neighborhoods. But then that's really it. They should fold in and do the testifying and do the land use actions through the planning.
In fairness to neighborhood associations, we've had a couple that functioned as bad apples, largely because they didn't follow their own bylaws. And I don't think they represent the neighborhood associations as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Bob LaSalle.
Bob LaSalle, and I'm a taxpayer of Oregon City. And I swore I would keep my mouth shut tonight.
we didn't hear it.
Don't make promises.
But I just couldn't stand it.
It happens.
I know for a fact, well, 99% sure, that on the CIC, we don't have any lawyers and we don't have any insurance agents. And I would be pretty sure that you would not find any lawyers or any insurance agents as officers of any of the neighborhood associations. Now, there has to be a reason for that. I know of at least one insurance agent that I talked to when I was researching this insurance thing. She told me that she had turned down an offer to possibly take part in her neighborhood association because of the lack of insurance. That's right out of the mouth of a very attractive young insurance agent.
Would it have made a difference if she weren't attractive?
At my age, probably not. And I can't fully believe that this whole thing about us becoming parts of the city holds all the weight in the world, because I've looked at a memorandum from the attorneys, and you probably have it in your hands, and there are some real untruths in here, blatant untruths. And so if they're in an official memorandum from the attorneys, what else can maybe be out there?
I guess
Would you like to point some of them
out?
out?
Not sure what they are.
I will for sure on the second page, second paragraph.
Can't pull it up for some reason.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Yeah, it's not coming up. Why is that?
We're not pulling up the city attorney's memo.
No.
You
Wait a
have,
minute.
you have
There
to
it
go
is.
back.
There it is.
There?
You have to put on.
On the floor?
I do that.
I know, but then you have to go down.
Oh,
Okay, here we go.
Got it.
Okay,
Down
of course.
there.
I knew that.
Okay, okay.
Okay, there we
Okay, where are you?
Everybody's on board?
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, second page, second paragraph, third line down, states, recently, several people have recognized that the neighborhood associations do not have insurance protection and have asked the city to provide it by making the neighborhood associations official instrumentalities of the city. Nobody has ever asked to become instrumentalities of the city. I don't know where that came from, but nobody's ever asked to become instrumentalities. We've been told we could become them if this whole thing happens. And then in the next paragraph, let's see, 1, 2, 3, fifth line down, the city has an obligation to ensure that its acts consistent with state law, including not just public records and meetings, but public contracting, non-discrimination, free speech, and other concerns. Those issues are already addressed in the neighborhood association bylaws. So this is nothing new. You know, we have to address discrimination, free speech, that sort of thing in our neighborhood bylaws. So this is a document from the attorneys. A bunch of legalese, but for example, at the very bottom there, I read this to my wife tonight, and that footnote, for example, events held by neighborhood associations would be subject to free speech protections, meaning these events would be open to all viewpoints, and garage sales might well be limited because of public contracting concerns. She looked at me and she asked me, what does that mean? Anyway, that's
Where
Note
did
at the
you?
very bottom, right?
at the very bottom of,
Oh, at the very bottom.
yeah, the footnote at the
I
very
see.
bottom there.
Wow.
So that's the extent of me keeping my mouth shut tonight.
Good job, Bob.
Thank you.
You wish to respond at all?
Well, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I'm a member of the Mount Tabor Neighborhood Association, and I don't have insurance, and I'm an attorney, and I think I'm pretty attractive. So I think that the advice that we've provided is that the more that the city does for neighborhood association, it's sort of a slippery slope. And the more the city extends protections or services, the more a court would view a neighborhood as an instrumentality. And that's the concern. I understand the neighborhood didn't ask for it, and I understand this sentence may be a little misleading because it suggests they may. But I think the concern is that the more the city does, the closer the entity looks like an arm of the city. As to the point about public contracting, you all know public contract rules are very complicated. They require competitive bidding. They require requests for proposals and review of proposals. Is very complicated. It is possible that neighborhood association activities, procurements by neighborhood associations, or the sale of goods would be subject to the public contracting rules as an instrumentality of the city. I know that seems like a long way down the road.
That seems very far-fetched.
It does. But a lawsuit against a director or an officer of a neighborhood seems a little far-fetched, I think. I think that the fact that we could not find such a lawsuit, true, we only looked in Oregon, we couldn't find an example of that, suggests that it doesn't happen very often. And to Commissioner Pauly's point about being nicer, one of the things that comes with insurance policies is the right to recover attorney's fees. And the ability to recover attorney's fees emboldens people often to be more litigious. And I might suggest that by providing this insurance, folks might be more interested, and situations that get heated may go further than we would like them to, if we could just be nicer to each other. And so Park Place disputes might erupt in situations that if there were coverage and folks were protected by the city in those circumstances.
Commissioner Smith, I have you down.
That's the exact point that I've been concerned about the whole time. I still don't know why we're talking about this topic. I don't see any way that I would support moving forward in insuring all the neighborhood associations, with the exception of the event insurance, which I think I have no problem talking about. I think that might be something we should talk about, but I don't. We've brought this up at so many different meetings, and we've had all the same answers time and time again, and I'm really not sure why we're still talking about it.
Okay, maybe at a different point we can talk about it in insurance.
That's up to you as a commissioner.
Well, I mean,
it's also something that the neighborhoods, if it's important to them, that they may want to just consider for themselves. They can acquire one-time event insurance. It's not very expensive, for like a garage sale or whatever particular event that they want to do. And as a neighborhood, if they want to maintain their independence, they should have means, some means to fundraise or to raise those funds to cover their activities. But it's just staff's opinion that it's just not something that we should become involved in. But it's your call.
Well, if we're not going to do it, then we need to make sure we're clear.
We're not giving any direction.
Right,
to do that.
but I just want this on the radar. If we're not going to do this, be clear to email or a letter needs to be sent out saying we're not going to, so they understand their own liabilities.
Okay.
And also look to see if they're covered by their own umbrella policy too, and kind of see where their insurance is at.
What insurance?
Personal.
A lot of people
insurance.
are covered by an umbrella policy.
The next item we have here.
May I make one last comment?
Yep.
Just something not completely related, but a little bit. I heard some comments tonight about the mailings and different things like that, and I just wanted to remind the whole community about goal number 4, that the city has made great strides in seeking opportunities to maintain communications with citizens and facilitate citizen participation. And we make every effort to utilize any and every type of communication that we possibly can to put that information out into the community. And we use electronics a lot. We have a Facebook page. We do Twitter. We do mailings. We do it in every way. And I would just encourage the neighborhoods to begin to open up more to utilizing different forms of social media. I have seen neighborhoods that use blogs, that use group email lists, that use Facebook a lot to communicate. There's a fire down the street, be careful, or whatever, those kinds of things to communicate and to help them to become less dependent on the city. I think that might be something that we should all strive for.
Okay, I have a question. So if we're not going to make a decision on this, how can we send out a letter instructing them?
We can't.
We'll at our city commission meeting, our regular city meeting.
Well, actually, I was going to ask about the direction, because right now we don't provide insurance, and unless there's an affirmative move by the commission consensus here that we should, then I would recommend that we notify folks that are on those commissions now that we don't provide it. that was discussed at a work session and some of the rationale why we don't provide it. And then I think to guard against misinformation in the future, we should put somewhere right on our webpage where we talk about citizen involvement. If you want to serve on a neighborhood association, here's how you do it, and then kind of have some bold text in there somewhere that says, by the way, you don't have insurance, so be nice to each other. Something like words to that effect. I'm sure we can do some legal wrangling, legalese there. But basically letting them know up front, because we don't want that to happen again sometime down in the future.
I have a question. If you're on your neighborhood committee, and you're also commissioner, then what happens?
You're covered as long as you're acting within the scope of your responsibilities as a commissioner.
So if you're just a neighborhood citizen, you're not covered.
Depends on what the role is.
So just sit there and shut your mouth.
Which is, yeah,
And,
exactly.
and even if your mouth's open, as long as you're being
Polite.
honest and truthful with each other and how you represent each other, I mean, the chances of somebody suing you are not that high if you're being civil to one another, and it's even less of recovering anything. So,
With that,
Yes.
we'll go ahead to the next topic, review of citizen involvement council bylaws related to neighborhood association representation.
Okay, and if you recall, at the April 17th meeting, the City Commission requested a work session to review the bylaws of the Citizen Involvement Council related to the neighbor association representation on the CIC. So we provided the bylaws for you, and since this was your request to have a discussion about it, we're turning it over to you for that discussion.
I wish this was redlined so we could see what was changed and what
Well, I don't
was-
think nothing has
nothing
been
has-
changed.
oh,
This is-
nothing's
yeah,
been
no,
changed.
we've not,
Okay. This is the approved document.
Okay.
I mean, some of the issues that I've heard related to having two people representing the CIC, having two votes, where maybe some neighborhood associations can only get one person to attend. But I think that's an issue of the individual neighborhood association, not of the CIC itself.
I have a question about, it says that we're going to have two neighborhood appointed representatives from each recognized neighborhood association, one representative from Main Street. Well, isn't that a neighborhood?
No.
Not yet.
Mm-mm. Well, it won't be either. That'll still be different.
No, it's in that new one, isn't it?
But they have a separate organization.
Have we approved that as a neighborhood association at this point?
You haven't approved it as a
Yeah,
neighborhood
so,
association.
I mean,
Two
that-
Rivers Neighborhood Association has not been formally recognized by the City Commission. It will be on your, I believe.
I don't know. We don't know
Okay,
yet.
never mind.
I see what Commissioner Roth is saying, though, because the Oregon City Chamber of Commerce is
Right.
an organization.
They're not
and
a
is-
neighborhood,
Is the
right.
Main Street, is it going to be from the Main Street organization itself, or
Or the neighborhood,
area?
right.
So,
And I think that's something that could be resolved in the neighborhood association as well.
Well, I think actually it goes to the CIC since these are their bylaws, and they have to figure it out.
We're currently, I don't want to speak for the CIC, but the CIC currently has a committee together that is reviewing these bylaws and they're making changes to them.
Oh.
So if I believe the reason this came before you, because if there was something you wanted to suggest that they put in their bylaws when they change them, then now would be the time.
okay.
Okay.
Well, I have a couple of questions. So, do I address you, Katie, or?
Whoever.
Okay, Article 2, Section 1A, county islands. How many county islands do we have?
Well, we annexed almost all of them
Yeah,
before.
we've taken care of most of them.
I don't think we permit them to form. anymore.
Well, we do have county islands still within our city, correct?
Tony might be able to answer that question.
And they have rights to be on the CIC, correct?
Do we have county islands? in the
According to
city?
these bylaws.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Hi, Tony.
Very good question.
How many Coney Islands do we have?
We don't have any.
Yes,
Oh, we have all that.
I think I want some.
We don't have it.
I have
Yeah, we
food
have
on my mind. County islands within the neighborhood association boundaries.
In the bylaws, it states here, Article 2, Section 1, current legal city limits boundaries will also include all areas of impact within the current urban growth boundaries. And then also, Article 2, Section 1C, areas of the county not adjacent to a recognized neighborhood association, but within the urban growth boundaries and not represented by a community planning organization. In our review of the bylaws, we're putting wording in that would encourage the neighborhood associations to outreach to those people that are not within the city limits but are within the urban growth boundary. So that would address those island issues.
So we have 5 tax lots off of Central Point Road.
So we have five islands then.
No, 5. It's one.
That's one island.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's one island of
One
5
island.
tax lots.
Okay.
But when we adopted the neighborhood association maps, as Mr. Sal was saying, we took those all the way out to the urban growth boundaries. So whether you're in the city limits or not, you're recognized in that neighborhood association, so that when you do annex in, we don't have to go back and continually update
Okay.
the neighborhood boundary map.
A few years ago, we annexed what we thought were all the islands, and I think we simply missed some.
Yeah,
And I don't know if this is one of them or not.
Well, this must-
We created this one.
So we created this one.
Oh, that was nice of us. Okay, so I had a question about that.
If I'm the chairman of that bylaws committee, if you wish me to stay here to answer questions.
Yeah,
I
Yeah,
have-
go ahead and say it.
I do have a question about the urban, you say you're reaching out to people within the urban growth boundary. Like, there's some people out by Carver that are in Oregon City, but not, they're in the urban growth boundary.
In Carver?
Where I lived, I was in the urban growth boundary. Forsyth and Bradley was urban growth. But we're not within the city limits, but it was within urban growth boundary. We were put in the last 10 years or so.
By Bradley?
Not of Oregon City.
No, but it's Metro.
Different.
We're talking about.
Oh, that was put into the urban or rural reserves. So that's not.
Not the same. Okay, because I'm
So
thinking you're going to be
that's-
reaching way out there if
No,
you.
the maps that I've seen are not nearly that far out.
Okay.
That's urban rural reserves.
You're going to be reaching Estacada.
No, thank you. You think our mailing is expensive now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, the points to have have them represent these groups is valid, because obviously our planning efforts will in one way or another eventually impact them. So I think it's reasonable.
Yeah.
So another question I had under Article 2, Section 5, appointment designees missing meetings. Who's going to keep track of that?
We're changing that.
Oh, okay.
I probably shouldn't bring it up now because we're still in
Yeah, that's fine.
the
Okay.
process of
That's fine.
speaking about it.
Okay, that's fine.
But we're, in some of the areas of the document, we're changing the words shall to may, and that kind of firms things up.
Currently, that's kept track of by the secretary.
Oh, okay, okay. And then on page 3, Article 5, officers and CIC coordinator, it says the coordinator coordinates all activities of the CIC.
Is that what you do?
Is that what you do? Is you coordinate all the activities? Or do you want to maybe think about the wording there?
Well, it's not of the neighborhood association, this is of the CIC.
The CIC. So
Right.
yeah, I do coordinate the majority of the presentations. The CIC themselves
that would
don't
be
do a lot
correct?
of activities outside of their meetings. So
Okay.
yeah, that would be correct
Okay.
at this point.
All right, just wanted to make sure.
Any other questions? Mr. LaSalle?
Well, I have a couple more.
Go ahead.
You know me, Bob. Let's see. We're moving to elections, okay?
What article?
Article 8.
Yeah.
Section 1. This goes back to what you might be cleaning up and why you're cleaning it up. Because this goes back to the Section 5, who's keeping track of who's attending what meetings and who has a right to vote. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So you guys might think about looking at that, because
We are definitely going to address the area of
Okay.
double representation that was brought up at the last
Okay.
commission meeting.
Okay. And then in that same area, section 5, I would recommend that you bold not, the following procedures will not be allowed. If you bold it, it will be apparent to everybody, and maybe we won't have so many,
Darn good idea. Thank you.
then maybe we won't have so many, voting problems.
We're not that far into the document yet, but that's fine.
Well, that's just kind of what I saw right now.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Bob.
Just to clarify, I presume if a person's engaged at a meeting by speakerphone, which we sometimes do in our city commission and urban renewal, that's not an absentee vote. That is, as long as they're participating in the meeting, is that right?
No.
In terms of your plan? No, I'm talking about in terms of what they're looking at.
Only the people in the meeting itself are allowed to vote.
So you won't have, if somebody can't make it, that they can't have a designee come in, and they cannot be on speakerphone.
As the way it's set states now, that's correct.
That might be something you guys want to look
You might
at.
want to look at that, because if there are all kinds of reasons a person could not be able to make it. If the person's not able to have a designee go in, and then the person's not even able to participate over a landline, I think that's, you're depriving that neighborhood of a vote that normally it might have. So you might want to take a look at that wording of that.
I've got that on my personal notes, but I'll put it down here also.
Okay.
What you might do is have every neighborhood gets one vote, and then the alternate gets to vote in place of the one that's not there. That'd be more complicated, I know, but food for thought.
Well, we've already addressed the issue of 2 votes per neighborhood association.
Okay.
That's kind of been settled.
Okay. Well, that's what I had. Thank you, Bobby.
Yeah.
And then does this come back to us?
It will, and we have to sign off on their bylaws, right?
Oh, and I had one other question.
Or do we?
Or-
We don't?
I don't think so.
We don't have to, okay.
No, it's theirs, right?
Yeah, they work on their own bylaws.
So this is kind of a question I have for the commission, probably. The Two Rivers Neighborhood Association is forming. They came before us, but they hadn't gone before the CIC to have them kind of vet their process through the CIC. Now, in my opinion, I thought that the neighborhood should have gone to the CIC, and then the CIC would have said, this is great, let's move forward with this, or, kind of made a recommendation with the group coming forward. I know we recognize them, but it didn't seem like we had any CIC involvement in that.
They didn't emanate from the CIC at all?
They attend the meetings, but they're not recognized.
And we weren't asked of our opinion of whether or not their position was valid or acceptable.
Right. And I
I
thought,
think the general opinion of everybody is, yes, it's a good idea.
Right.
I don't think there's anybody that doesn't want them, but no, the CIC was not addressed on that.
I thought that would be something that, we use TAC for that kind of stuff, for transportation. So, I don't know, I just thought we could have used the CIC for that. Thank you, Bob.
Am I released?
Yeah, sure.
Till the next.
Mr. Mahoney?
I wasn't going to do this.
We weren't going to do it the first time.
Question. You're saying that people outside the city, but inside the urban growth boundary, in these neighborhood associations, could conceivably have influence on a ballot measure that people inside the city are going to vote on.
Correct.
It seems a little strange to me.
I'm confused.
I am
That
too.
doesn't have to do with ballot measures.
Person sitting outside the city
Yeah.
in the neighborhood association could join in conversation with people inside the city.
I hope so.
Okay. But somehow influence the outcome of a vote inside the city. They're not going to vote,
No, they won't be able to vote.
but just by an exchange of ideas,
Yes.
they will be able to influence people inside the city.
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
I don't think it's proper.
Why not? I mean, if there's a
They have
potential
to-
of them being annexed in, why wouldn't they have a voice in it?
Well, maybe it's on a ballot issue to have something to do with a bond measure or something like that. And, you know, how people talk and stuff like that. Oh, yeah, okay, Joe lives outside the city, he's right. I'm not going to vote, I live inside the city, but I'm going to follow his influence. It might be a thin line of logic, but it doesn't seem to me like somebody that outside the city should have any influence about something that takes place inside the city.
I'm confused. I mean, the CIC, they,
I'm not talking about the CIC.
well, that's what we're talking about. These are the CIC bylaws that we were discussing.
Okay, but don't they have some influence or some representation through the neighborhood associations?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's what I'm saying. Why should we extend a membership to people outside the city to have any influence in either the CIC or the neighborhood associations? Why don't we keep it all inside the city? That's what
Well,
I'm
that's something that they can take a look at.
I understand what you're saying.
You see what I'm
and
saying,
I can think of a person who regularly says, well, she attends the meetings,
Yes.
she lives outside the city,
Right.
says she never wants to be in the city,
Yeah.
but she influences a lot of...
We have a person that comes in
She votes.
at the planning commission meeting regarding a traffic situation on a piece of highway, roadway that is outside the city,
Right.
and never, to my knowledge, approaches the Board of County Commissioners in their transportation policies, but always comes to the city of
city.
Oregon City
Right.
Right.
and asks them to address it.
Right.
We sit there as a planning commission when our hands are tied, you know, and you know, people see that, and so I'm just saying that keep it all within the city limits.
Yeah, no, I see that.
Thank you.
But, I guess I simply, this is an input to the CIC. It's not any direction that comes through the planning commission except to people lending their opinions about things. I don't see the problem.
Well, it's a problem for the planning commission when people outside in the county.
Yeah, and if you say that we can't do that, that's fine. But the point is, if they're within the urban growth boundary, or if they're an island,
The urban growth boundary doesn't.
Well, in any case-
doesn't impress me at all. The city limits is what impresses me, because you're the ones that represent the city. Thank you.
Anyway, with that, we've got another item, transportation system plan update. And that will be
Actually,
Mr. Lewis. Do you want to delay that one too?
like I had this one earlier. So Laura and Christina are going to, they've done the lion's share of the work on the presentation.
We have a request for a break, and I think that's fine, because this will probably be some presentation, I presume.
It'll probably be a long one.
Yeah, so yes, we'll take a break.
Thank you.
So it's not me that wants to delay, it's you that wants to delay.
Reconvening.
Thank you, Mayor Neal.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yes.
You ready to go?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Neal and Commissioners. We're here again to present on the transportation system plan. I don't know, John Lewis, if you want to have anything you want to add?
Go for it,
Okay. At our last work session, we talked a little bit about the larger background materials of the transportation system plan. Here, we are going to do a brief overview of the code amendments. You will have the full staff report and planning commission updates items that have been amended at your meeting next week. So this is just some of the topics we thought that tonight needed a little extra time to review. This is not all-encompassing, but we've kind of chosen these topics that we wanted to spend a little more time on outside of the public hearing land use hearing. Why don't you go further?
As you remember from last time, the transportation plan looks at how we get around Oregon City and how we can get around Oregon City better between now and the year 2035. We want to look at all modes of travel, whether it's cars or walking or biking, and we want to make sure we have a balance and an equitable system. The purpose of tonight's presentation is go through, as Christina said, update you on Planning Commission concerns, go through our code amendments very quickly, and then also we really want to know from you, is there any additional issues you want us to research or any particular problems that you found, and we want to take the time between now and then the next time we see you to research that for you. We are changing our code because we got we have a requirement to do so in order to comply with the plans you see listed. Some of our situations in our city have changed. Our current TSP was adopted in 2001. Since then, we've had a lot of concept plans, annexations, and we also got quite a bit of money from ODOT to do this. So,
real briefly, I wanted to update. At the last Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission formally voted to move and recommend approval of the Transportation System Plan and associated code amendments to the City Commission with kind of 3 additional comments. One, they chose to remove the McLaughlin Commercial Parking Overlay District from the recommended parking overlay code changes, and I'll talk about that when we get to that slide. They continued their vocal support for a robust parking management program, and also that they, outside of this TSP process, they still wanted to find ways to address geotechnical concerns that could be reviewed prior to a specific development application, so kind of like a little higher level, but not as part of this TSP process and not for a specific development application. And Pete Walter will be making a small presentation about that at the next week's meeting. Here, one of the slides I really wanted to make sure was in tonight's presentation was our codified edition of modifications, of applicability section that looked at when new 1- and 2-family homes are proposed in the city, these are especially in lots of record or as part of a new construction outside of a land use process, that the property owners provide the required dedication, easements, or agreements, and spend 10% of the construction cost on street pavement and curbs, gutters, sidewalks, and planter strips. And this can start to help address some of that kind of broken teeth of the smile, that feeling of you have a subdivision with a beautiful sidewalk, and then you have maybe another quarter mile of no sidewalk, and you have another subdivision with another sidewalk. Barring doing a corridor plan, and we may have those in the future, this is another avenue to start working on infill sidewalks. Another code section that we definitely wanted to have specifically codified in our code, we had it more as a Public Works Director policy, was the ability to modify street conditions and street condition requirements for land use applications that are context sensitive. The way our code works, we have a requirement that spells out a street design, and the largest street we could possibly make someone build is what we codify, because that's kind of our legal requirement. We have to ask for the most, and then we can work backwards. And what we've done in this code is we've actually codified the criteria we use to move backwards and look at a more context-sensitive design for that specific situation. And now the community, through a land use action like a subdivision or site plan and design review, we have to make our findings of why we are only doing a 5-foot attached sidewalk because the whole street is 5 feet attached sidewalks, and having a 100-foot section of a 5-foot plan of street and 5-foot sidewalk wouldn't make sense. But now we've done this in a way that is clear and objective and can be reviewed by the public through a Type 2 process. As you recall, in the previous presentation I made about code amendments for parking, we as the city have a requirement to show that we reduce parking minimums near transit. And looking at our current parking minimums, we actually meet the metro requirement, but we want to do more because we want to work to make our downtown area truly a multimodal downtown that supports biking, transit, and walking, and we can't do that, we feel, with our existing parking standards that require a certain amount of parking off-street to the level really is not set up for an urban environment. It's more of a suburban environment that looks at people driving only to that specific use parking in that specific parking lot and not walking anywhere or taking transit, and that is based on the highest use for the whole day and not assuming that there's any combination of or shared uses for any of the site. What we did is we made a recommendation of 3 things. One, proposed a downtown parking overlay district, which reduces the minimum required off-street parking for projects to 50% of the citywide requirements. We also recommended a 35% reduction in the McLaughlin commercial parking overlay district, which we identified as generally the mixed-use corridor along Center, High, and 7th Street in McLaughlin. And we also proposed an addition of a planning commission parking adjustment process with its own specific criteria to review parking adjustments rather than sending an applicant to the general variance review process of the planning commission that has a lot more kind of grayer qualitative review criteria compared to our specific parking adjustment criteria.
Could I stop you there?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little confused. You're talking about reduction in required parking?
Correct.
Less cars?
No, reduction in the required off-street parking stalls. So let's say, right. So for example, in our current code, there's 2.7 spaces per 1,000 square feet of office as minimum, and a maximum is 3.3. A new 2-story office development comes in downtown. If I remember correctly, the slide I showed last time, it had an example of 52 parking spaces required. For this was actually, I think, a 3-story building. What the code sections would do is it would say you get an across-the-board 50% cut. So that same building, maybe built up on Hilltop, would only require 50% of the off-street parking. So basically 50% of the requirement of the parking lot would be half as big, if you want to think about it that way, than you would in other areas of the city, knowing that downtown you have transit, walkability, biking, and people using shared resources, such as on-street, more access to on-street parking, and knowing that if we kept our existing parking minimums that we have citywide, you are, for the most part, dictating the FAR, the floor area ratio of buildings downtown to be quite small, because you can't physically put that many stories and that much parking into a lot without basically requiring structured parking.
So this is for new construction?
This is new or additions to existing.
Okay.
Correct. And the planning, also in your packet, you'll see a letter from Rick Williams. He was the author of the 2009 parking study. And we went back to him and said, what do you think of our proposed changes? How does this work? We know you had specific numbers in the downtown parking study. Is this a reasonable extrapolation for the north end of downtown and McLaughlin? And his letter is in the record. And if you hadn't read it already, I really do recommend you read it. He's a region-wide expert on parking management, and he looked at studies all up and down kind of the I-5 corridor, both in Washington and Oregon, and how other jurisdictions that look at that. And he basically has indicated that existing required parking is almost always above the actual demand of the parking. So if we are basically forcing developers to provide additional off-street parking than the market generally would require. And so what Rick is saying is we need to be below what the market is requiring, just below the market requiring, so we're not forcing developers to provide parking that they aren't anticipating or needing, and forcing them to work with other property owners around them to utilize existing on-street parking and to work towards a more multimodal, so walking, biking, and transit approach to downtown. The Planning Commission moved forward with the recommendations for the parking adjustment process, as well as the downtown 50% off-street parking reduction, but they chose to remove the McLaughlin commercial parking overlay district at this time. They felt that the reduction would adversely affect the residents, and that was taken out of the packet as it's presented to you.
I think it's important not to, discourage investment by, having the required parking, but not to sound like a broken record, but I will anyway. So if we reduce parking, how are we going to get, and we don't have the transportation to get people to there because bus lines have been cut in the city. Mm-hmm. How are we going to get people to there if they can't park there? That's a big concern.
Right. It's the chicken. Another analogy is chicken and egg. You're not going to get the 3- and 4-story mixed-use housing projects that you talked about in your previous part of the meeting if you are not making a reduced requirement for parking. And you're not going to get that if you don't require reduced requirement of parking. And therefore, you're not going to get the people to live downtown. You're not going to get the investment in additional office use downtown and housing that's going to change that cycle. And once again, we can't control TriMet's funding, but one of the main things we keep hearing from TriMet over the whole time I've been here is you will get more service when you provide more rooftops. It's that correlation between you need to have the demand in order for the service to come, regardless of TriMet's fiscal situation. And we need to keep moving it forward. I think the second part I really want to reiterate, and I get this on my end on the planning's part, developers are very, very reticent to move forward on a development application if they know they have to get a planning commission variance to parking. So what Rick is saying is if you were requiring too many variances for your parking, you probably have too high parking. I mean, that's one of this bit of a truism person. But we need to move our parking closer to what the market is asking for and looking at. And he thought our 50% reduction was actually pretty spot on, and actually he encouraged us as we move forward in the coming years to keep recalibrating and to even go lower as the market makes sense for us to do that, as that chicken and egg happens where we start to provide more support to be a truly multimodal downtown.
So it's trusting that the transportation will come along with it.
Well, it's not just trusting, but you're just always analyzing. And we talked before about parking management. That's a constant everyday review is to make sure, are we properly putting the proper hours on the as maybe the north end grows more. Does that need to be 2-hour parking? How do we make sure that employees aren't using on-street parking? How are they utilizing it? And let the property owner figure out what Rick said a little bluntly. There's a point where the property owner needs to figure out where their employees are going to park. And let the property owner do that, and visitors and customers are where the on-street parking is. So that's some of that dynamic. But when we start to require across-the-board minimums that may be more than what a developer wants, that's I think where we're at in regards to viability of development.
You're talking about a minimum parking. A person, for example, that's going to have residential and figures are going to have one. Each resident's still going to have a car even if they use the bus. They'll still be able to accommodate that. It's the case that, am I correct?
Right, they may be able to accommodate. We have parking minimums, so there may be, if you look as an example, 1.5 spaces is required for each multifamily unit, and that may make sense up on top of the hill, but with 50% reduction, you're still at 0.75 spaces.
But the point is the developer themselves could go beyond
Absolutely.
above
These are the
minimum.
minimums. We are
yeah.
not changing our maximum. So
Right.
that means a developer's coming in with a pro forma that assumes that 0.75 spaces per units makes sense. And that may make sense for some projects, and other projects like a condo may not, because most people may not want to buy a condo in Oregon City without a guaranteed parking. And that was the case 10 years ago in Portland, and that's changed. So the market's always changing, and I think the key is to just make sure we're not having adopted code that is basically making it very hard for development to come downtown, a lot like we had in regards with the vertical housing credit. We want to remove those barriers, but in a reasonable format.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I have just a kind of a scenario. So I'm a developer. I'm going to build an apartment building, and it's going to be retail on the bottom. And I'm going to tell you that I only need 6 parking stalls for this building that's going to house 20 families and businesses.
Well, I would say first we need to look back to the code, because we're still saying it's a 50% reduction on our requirements. So retail per 1,000 square feet is 4.1 spaces as a minimum.
And
Citywide,
that's moving down to 2.
2, right. And then you have the way our code for our multifamily, it's each studio, 1, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom unit, you have a different factor. So as an example, you go 1.5 unit to 0.75. They're still providing that on their property. So
I mean, I can see we're already in a parking dilemma downtown already, and cutting new business. I mean, I understand we don't want to stop business from coming. I totally get that. I'm concerned about the.
And I agree, and I think it's that leap of saying we have to, in concert, reduce the parking minimums to a reasonable level and make sure that we are constantly assessing our parking management strategy. We're probably going to be getting more new development in the north end of downtown and not necessarily in our core of 5th through 10th, where we have most of our parking issues. I was here at the last city commission meeting when we had your parking update, and what I was hearing from the north end is I was hearing you were under your 85%. Right. So as a scenario, a vacant lot in the north end redevelops or makes an addition, and that's added. That may make sense for the first couple of years that nothing changes, because it's that one new development and there's enough parking and it's fine. Right. But as you start to get more and more of those, then you may need to reassess your parking management strategies. Is your pricing okay? Do we have the right number of hours for that? So that's why I think it's that you can't just set it and forget it. This is a code change that has to happen right now, because there's only so many times that we can change our code, but parking management never changes. It's always a constant tweaking. And once again, these are the minimums. This is not saying that a development, we're not changing the maximums, and a developer can go on.
If I might add too, the reason we have this intense challenge in the downtown core where the courthouse is located, the challenges we have in our downtown are not because the city doesn't have adequate parking for the city. It's because our biggest customer down there has virtually no parking for their visitors. So that's what's driving this, and I think the TSP are looking at a much bigger footprint. So we have this sort of problem area that we all think about because it's the problem area, but there's a really good reason for that, and that's I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in my reports.
So I think in general we feel this is a very balanced first approach, and I was definitely pushed by Rick to go more, because he's a bit of an evangelical parking management person, if you haven't heard him talk before. But he really truly feels that minimum parking requirements over the last 50 years have dramatically shaped who we are as suburbs.
So you saw the light, huh?
What?
You saw the light, huh?
Well, I've seen the light a long time ago, but I think that this is a good, reasonable way to move forward on that. And a lot of people bring up the Portland issue. They're over here, and we're kind of over here, and our parking code's over here. So it's just a little bit of an apples oranges approach, and I call this kind of the Oregon City context. But the Planning Commission at this time just felt that the McLaughlin parking overlay district was not appropriate and may adversely affect residents. So kind of leave that back to the City Commission to give additional direction. This was a map. The area in blue is the parking overlay for downtown, and in pink was the McLaughlin overlay. And at this point, we're going to bring it over to Carrie Richter to talk about mobility standards, which has kind of been, I think, one of the last little tweaky issues of the TSP that we've been working very diligently on. And I know it's a little bit late, but I'd like to get your full attention because I get confused sometimes with this. So if it's a little confusing, please understand that it's not easy for any of us.
Thank you, Christina. Mayor Neely and City Commission members, the City Code right now regulates congestion. And they do that through level of service, the alpha, the A, B, C, D, E, F, and we do it through volume to capacity ratios. And the state generally regulates by volume to capacity ratios, and the city regulates by level of service. And a few years ago, we changed Goal 12. Goal 12 is the transportation goal, to provide greater flexibility in those level of service or congestion thresholds. What ODOT and the state were seeing was we measure these by peak hour, and if we try to build an intersection to accommodate at a peak hour, we're going to spend a ton of money to build these gigantic intersections that we will use for 1 hour. And the intersections are getting more expensive and the solutions are getting more expensive, and it's just not worth it when we can potentially look at larger corridors, alternative modes of transportation, providing more bus service, providing easier alternative transportation routes, and help to reduce the congestion at lower cost. So these mobility standards are new attempts to provide greater flexibility. And so included in the code amendments are these new congestion levels. And what we've determined as part of this analysis, that we have 4 intersections on state-owned highways that are likely to fail in the near future. They're listed here: I-205 and Oregon 99E interchange, I-205 Oregon 213 interchange, Oregon 99E McLaughlin Main Street, and Oregon 213 at Beaver Creek Road. So these interchanges are likely to fail under the existing code we have now. Under the existing mobility standards, they're likely to fail within the planning horizon. So an applicant comes, they show that they're going to use a particular intersection. The intersection is going to fail. What does the city do? The city has 2 choices at that point. It denies the application, or it requires that the applicant repair the intersection, right? And they can repair that intersection either by paying a proportionate share and the city pools the money, or they ask the applicant to pay the improvement and the applicant gets reimbursed when other developments come online. So that would be, if we maintain the status quo, that's where we would be. The problem with this, for these 4 intersections, is that ODOT hasn't identified a solution to improve the level of service, improve the congestion circumstance. So even if the city wanted to collect the money to improve McLaughlin Boulevard at Main Street, we wouldn't know how much to collect. And it would be a tremendous amount of money to change that tunnel, as I understand it. And if ODOT, through its new objectives of providing more flexibility, understanding that we don't want to absorb these big high-ticket items and we want to look at alternatives, it doesn't make sense to collect all this money to pay for these improvements anyway. We don't want to do a $20 million fix if we can do a $2 million fix and help encourage some multimodal travel. So where that leaves us is a proposal for some new mobility standards for the intersections where we know the fix. For the 4 intersections where we don't know the fix yet, we need to work with ODOT to adopt some alternative mobility standards. And we don't know what those alternative mobility standards will look like. They will be corridor studies, and they will be, maybe we accept a greater amount of congestion during the peak hours if we do X, Y, and Z. We haven't done the study yet. So what staff is recommending in the interim, until we can do these studies, which we anticipate will take about a year, is that we approve development that exceeds the mobility standards, if it is allowed outright or conditionally in the zone. And there is a chart in the code of some little improvements, sort of the best we can do. We're talking about page 8 of the code amendments that you have. I believe it's page 8. Is it page 8?
And that would just be in those identified areas?
In those identified areas, you'll see we've got a short list of improvements. These are items that are listed in the TSP as well, that are sort of what Christina has referred to as sort of the best we can do. This is the best we can make the intersections without the big ticket item improvements, again, that we don't know exactly what they are. So we either go with option 1, which is the status quo. We deny applications in the interim until we have identified alternative mobility standards, or we approve requests and require the developers to pay for these big ticket items that we may not build because we may decide we don't really want them after we do the alternative mobility analysis. Or we go with this option 2, which is to allow permitted and conditional uses to exceed the congestion standards for identified intersections until the alternative mobility standards are created. We're looking at a year. For master plans, we'll approve only requests for short-term projects that are likely to happen immediately, not the red soil scenario where they're phase 12, because we don't know what the future of these roads is going to look like until we do this alternative analysis. One of the suggestions would be that we could alter the SDCs to collect money for a major transportation facility offset fund. Again, we'd have to talk about how much that fund would be. We had sort of, John Lewis put together some numbers of 20 million. If we assume that these improvements would be 20 million, again, we have really no idea what they will be. But if we assume they would be 20 million, and the city pays a third, it was 147 a trip, would be the increase to the SDCs associated with these intersections. If you decided you want.
That's huge for a developer.
It could be. It could be. And you know, again, my concern about it, aside from being huge for development, is that it's not likely ODOT is going to build it.
Right.
If ODOT's not going to build it, why should we collect for it?
Yes.
Our legal obligation here is to implement what the state has identified in their plan. The state has not identified a solution for these intersections, so we have no obligation to implement it. The risk is everyone takes advantage of this.
Right.
It makes the intersection worse.
And over time, if we're not collecting anything, then when they say game over, we have nothing. We have no money to encourage any kind of solution. That's what scares me the most. So that's why we've come up with this compromise.
So the compromise is do the best you can. Do these sort of this short list of things that would make the intersection better.
Right.
Short of building a new intersection.
Things like at Beaver Creek in 213, I think everybody in the room probably recognizes we could probably extend the turn pocket a little bit, or eliminate part of the island and extend that turn pocket. You know, that's one of those kinds of solutions.
John, this brings up Paul Edgar's comment about the 2 lanes turning to southbound 205 off of 99E south. I mean, we're saying that we need to do, in the interim, short-term fixes, and that's an interim short-term fix. It would be relatively inexpensive.
The problem there is when we looked at that is the on-ramps. So once you make the double left off of 99E southbound onto the on-ramp to 205, that on-ramp isn't wide enough to accommodate
It's
2
double
lanes.
lanes.
It's
not ODOT.
It's not ODOT standard.
Yeah.
So while it's double lanes now, they won't put 2 lanes in to accept it. So even though it's double laned right now, there's an issue with how wide that is. Plus, when you start to come on 205, you have an issue with, similar to what we ran into on 213 and 205, where you had the weave movement going on.
Yeah, it's real
As
short
you're coming
there.
southbound, you have weaving over, then you have people weaving over to get onto 10th.
To go off the
So that's the one, that's the obstacle we've run into with that, because we went through that with the code.
You weren't going to say anything, were you?
And I think before we,
Whatever you want me to say.
and I think it's just important too to point when Ms. Richter was talking about this interim time period that we would be exempting these 4 facilities that we've identified for permitted uses in the zone and conditional uses in the zone. What that means, if someone comes in for a comprehensive plan amendment or a zone change, they will be denied until we get these new standards into place.
They will be denied, or they will pay to. We will come up with we will come up with a solution for the intersections.
Right.
But that would have to, again, meet the equation of the current standard, right? It would have to meet the current standard for mobility, right? Which
And a
could
plan
be-
amendment and zone change, all bets are off. I mean, we're back to state law required mobility standards, and we'd have to negotiate the solutions when and if the time comes.
Can I ask a
So
question?
back to Paul's point, his point is at the wrong place. The problem is at the interchange, not between the Clackamas River Bridge and Dunes Drive. The problem is at the interchange, and there are some things noted in the transportation system plan that include improvements there, but they're still not going to do.
Bring back
They're
the
not going to meet the
3-lane.
mobility standards that we need. So, or they're not going to meet the current mobility standard, and that's why we'd have to do this corridors. Some kind of an alternate mobility standard. Come up with that.
When the state is setting these new guidelines and standards, are they looking at, we're not going to be the vehicle-driven Wild West forever? Everybody out here, you drive because it's so far between places. But are those standards looking at, that has to change?
Well, that's what this is about. It's about accepting the fact that the congestion, we can't make it so easy to drive. That we're going to have to accept greater congestion, and that greater congestion is going to encourage folks to take alternative modes of transportation, which is going to make it less like the vehicle-driven West.
Well, I think the other part to that is also when we talk about the AM or the PM peak hour, or even if we're looking at the 2-hour AM or PM peak, how do you want to spend the resources that you have available to you? Because for the other 18, 19, 20 hours of the day, you have more capacity on those systems than you're going to use. And then the other part of that is, in some situations, can you really build yourself out of this? Or do you need to start looking at it on a larger basis of the corridor? Are there things we can do in that corridor to make it move more efficiently, realizing in these alternative mobility standards, the way that the state has set them up, this is something that the community, the city commission, needs to bring forward as an option. We could certainly go and say, we're going to have 4 projects and price ranges from 40 to 80 million, and just make, but like Beaver Creek 213, you're probably looking at a Diamond Point overpass interchange. Is that what we want in our community? And the price associated with that is going to be huge. And the other thing you got to remember here is that we put those projects in. Those are system development charges going straight to development in our community, and these are state and regional facilities, and there's an equity issue there. And if we're going to collect, for example, 213, 40-some% of those trips don't start or stop in Oregon City. So, that's the other part of this is the equity issue, the where do you want to invest, and where can that investment improve more of that corridor for more of the day, rather than shooting for this one time period that we're looking at that drives this congestion.
Not to mention the state is pretty much saying, dream on. We've got bigger needs around the region. We're not planning to fund a Beaver Creek 213, diamond flyover interchange. So that's why. I guess the other thing is we're on the leading edge of this. The region has these problems all over, but we're kind of the first ones at the trough that get to figure out how to deal with this problem. And I think this has taken us a fair amount of discussion internally to figure out how to get there, try to hold our development community accountable for, if a project comes up in the next year. Also, we're a little concerned about what the scope of work is really going to look like for these to do these studies. We're not exactly sure where we're going to land on that, although Carl will help us out with that, I'm sure. But so it seems like the best compromise we could, with good minds in the room, figure out how to put together.
Thank you.
So we want to hear from you if there's anything in our transportation system plan that you want more refining. Are there any problems that you foresee? Is there any direction you want to give us to research more? And then we'll be back before you next week. As we talked about before, we had some $215,000 grant from ODOT to complete this study. And one of those requirements was that the money stops at the end of June. So we have a sort of tentative schedule. If you need more meetings, we can have them more, but that's why we were sort of shooting for that tight timeline.
I guess the question I have here, just based, I was looking at your new table in terms of major arterials, distinction between mixed use, commercial, industrial, and residential.
Sorry, what page are you on?
This will be on page 3, I guess. I guess on some of these things, unless I'm missing something, if I look at pavement width, public access, sidewalk, landscape, bike lane, and so forth, across the mixed-use commercial, they look like they're almost all the same, but the right-of-way requirement in residential is larger, and the reason for that is why.
We can go back and check our math and make sure it's right.
Go with a wider planter strip there.
Yeah, sometimes for industrial, for example, in the areas may not be appropriate for on-street parking. That may be some of the right-of-way reduction. Looking at that.
The lane widths are slightly different as well.
Yeah, I can see the sidewalk landscape strip. They're both different there, and those two. I guess that's what's making up the difference.
We did a wider lane in industrial for those big trucks as well. So this is a change from our current code. We wanted to be more context sensitive, but also give clear guidance for what street standards we want. So now we just have one standard for minor arterials, and now we'll use our comprehensive plan and say for our comprehensive plan, industrial areas, this is what arterial should look like, because we don't need on-street parking, but maybe we should have a little bit wider lanes for the trucks. But if it was to be downtown, we do want on-street parking, and maybe the lanes don't need to be so wide for trucks. So this is how we approach that problem. There's a couple other differences in our code as well, like we require covered bike parking and just a few other requirements that are required of us from the regional transportation plan.
I think the Planning Commission did walk through both the code as well as the TSP. I think they've highlighted, Christina and Laura, kind of the last remaining issues that we were addressing with them before they made their recommendation. As they said, we'd be happy to answer any questions you have on the specifics. We know there's a lot in there, and we do have another opportunity to go over this again. But if there was any big red flag that you did have, we could either try and answer that tonight or come back. I think for us from the staff level, these 4 intersections are a big deal, and I just want to make sure that you're comfortable and understand, how what the problem is, and what we're proposing to try and fix it, and what those options are that are available to you.
Any other questions or additions? Thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation.
I'll see you next week.
Yes, that's right. Well, with that, we get to city's manager's report, in which he indicated he will talk about something we were already talking about.
You recall at the outset, under future agenda items, I believe it was Commissioner Mumm that asked about the downtown parking meeting with the county, and I, during one of the breaks, I emailed one of our staff to find out if there was any follow-up on that from the county, and we did hear from them apparently this afternoon that their commissioners are booked solid until June because they're working on their budget issues. So we are going to aim for the first possible opportunity in June for that meeting with them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And that's all I have this evening.
Oh, okay. That? We'll adjourn?
Do we get to say anything?
Oh, you got something to say in the space
I have
station?
some questions. Well, one of them, Betty, you hold me back.
Okay, I'll hold you back.
This is informational only.
That's good.
We're having a phone bank tomorrow night.
Phone bank tomorrow night.
Anybody wants to join us on the phones? Or the 13th, 5 o'clock, and I can give you the address. And then the questions are, back to the flashing light on John Adams and 7th.
Yes.
Have we ever just considered a crosswalk?
We actually did study crosswalk there, and just based on the sight distance concerns and kind of the topography there, we're not recommending a crosswalk without flashing beacons. So we don't want that liability.
Okay, and then just a comment that I heard last night about when you used to come off of Clackamas River Drive onto 213, the north part of Clackamas River Drive, if you were coming from out of town in and you were going to turn right onto 213, you could just do it. You could just turn right without waiting for the light.
Right.
You sit there forever now. Why isn't that lane a dedicated lane so you can just keep going? That's horrible.
It's an ODOT safety issue. I'm not sure if they've got plans to reevaluate that, but from the onset of the project, they would not allow that right turn on red. So I don't mind asking that question yet again.
Please.
But we've had the same thing on Prairie Schooner Way. You get on Prairie Schooner Way, you can't turn right on a red onto 213, and that's we've advocated with ODOT to get that, and they won't allow it. But we'll ask again.
Thank you. Or just put a barrier across that lane and make it dedicated.
Don't do
that.
I will say that I've seen people making the right turns on red, and they're taking when they do it. I've seen other people braking so that they could get in. I think it's extremely dangerous.
It has to do with the speed along 213, and some people are aggressive when they make their right turns, and other people are very slow, and so their concern is for the rear-end accidents. But
but I've seen traffic backed all the way up to the circle at times now, which is pretty bad. It didn't help that side of the river at all, or that side of the freeway at all. Thank you.